and gentlemen, please take your seats and kindly silence your phones. Our program
For
is
over
about
a
to
century, the people have fought. For over a century, the people of Iran have fought against repression and injustice. Yet across the country, across generations and professions, a new certainty has taken root. The future can and will be different. Women are leading with courage. Youth are driving the call for change. People across Iran, from Sanandaj and Zahedan to Tehran, and from Avaz and Tabriz to Mashhad, are fighting for freedom, justice, and a life worthy of their sacrifice. This movement is not a moment. It is a continuum of hope and unyielding determination for liberty and sovereignty. It is the culmination of 120 years of the fight against the dictatorship of monarchs and mullahs. Today, more than 1,000 Iranian community leaders, scholars, experts, professionals, and distinguished international guests are converging in a day-long landmark event to herald Iran's democratic future. They will present a viable roadmap to end clerical rule and to ensure that once it falls, power transfers peacefully to the people through free elections. A future where the rule of law replaces violence, where women are equal, where religion and state are separate, where every nationality and faith has equal rights, and where prosperity is built through peace, not repression or war. This is the Free Iran Convention 2025, the path to a democratic, prosperous republic.
ای ایران ای مرز پرگوهر ای خاکت سرچشمه هنر دور از تو اندیشه بدان پاینده مانی تو جاودان ای دشمن ار تو سنگ خاره ای جان من فدای خاک پاک میهنم مهر تو چون شد پیشم دور از تو نیست اندیشم در راه تو کی ارزشی دارد این جان ما پاینده باد خاک ایران ما ایران ای در آتش بارد به پیکرم جز مهرت در دل نپرورم با آب و خاک و مهر تو سرشته شد دلم مهر اگر برون رود تهی شود دلم مهر تو چون شد پیشم دور از تو نیست اندیشم در راه تو کی ارزشی دارد این جان ما پاینده باد خاک ایران ما
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, my name is Suna Samsami. I'm the U.S. representative of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to Free Iran Convention 2025. Today, we are hosting an extraordinary gathering of Iranian scientists, professionals, and young people whose hearts beat for a democratic and free Republic Iran. At this decisive moment, when the regime is at the weakest political and social point, the presence of such a broad, experienced community united in the shared demand for the overthrow of the Iranian regime, a religious tyranny, and to examine the roadmap for change and the future of our homeland country is both essential and inspiring. For 44 years, NCRI has served as the only genuine democratic alternative to Mullah's regime. A central strategic principle of NCRI over these 4 decades have been the uncompromising rejection of 2 dictatorships, the theocracy of the Mullahs and the monarchy that preceded it. This resistance and its components, especially the MEK-PMI, have not wavered for 45 years in their determination to overthrow religious fascism in Iran, and they have paid the highest possible price for their steadfastness. Just look at the long list of the fallen for freedom of this resistance movement. The NCRI vision, reflected in the 10-point plan of Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, the president-elect of the NCRI, offering the Iranian people a clear vision for future and a concrete plan for the transition to a democratic republic in Iran, including separation of religion and state, full equality between men and women, an independent judiciary, freedom of speech, assembly, political parties, and freedom of press, prohibition of torture, abolition of death penalty, autonomy, and an end to discrimination against Iran's ethnic minorities and national minorities, in accordance with the NCRI policy, and a non-nuclear Iran. Over the past 4 decades, NCRI has achieved historic endeavors by exposing the regime's clandestine nuclear weapons program. NCRI prevented the Iranian regime from secretly reaching an atomic bomb, throw the world into a crisis. It was the NCRI who put forward the peace initiative to end the Iran-Iraq war, a proposal that laid the political foundation for ending the conflict. It has provided the most accurate reports on execution, arrests inside Iran daily and sometimes hourly, as well as on the regime's war machine and its terrorist networks, leading the most campaigns to counter the terrorism and violation of human rights in Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin this convention, we gather with a shared purpose to help chart the path toward a prosperous, free, democratic republic in Iran. I wish you all a very productive, meaningful, and successful convention. And now I ask my colleague Anna to take the stage to MC this event. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and champions of freedom. Welcome to the Free Iran Convention 2025. My name is Anna Sami, an attorney and a proud second-generation Iranian. Today is not a routine gathering. It is history in the making. For the first time, Iranian scholars, professionals, and community leaders from across the United States have come together to chart a path from dictatorship to a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear republic. This is more than an event. It is a movement fueled by courage, conviction, and the unshakable belief that freedom is not a privilege, but a right. Throughout the day, you will hear from those who have dared to defy tyranny and from global allies who stand with the Iranian people and their fight for liberty and justice. Together, we will confront the challenges of Iran's present, explore the forces driving change, and present a vision for a free, democratic Iran at peace with itself and the world. Let us be clear, this is not just a dialogue. It is a declaration that dictatorship is not destiny, and that the Iranian people deserve dignity, democracy, and peace. So, let us begin with open minds, bold hearts, and unwavering resolve, because today we don't just imagine a free Iran, we commit to building it. And ladies and gentlemen, before I announce the first panel, I would like to draw your attention to your event badges. The first QR code you can scan to receive the guide for today's event. And the next QR code is for the question and answer. You can follow the prompts and submit your questions, and the panelists will answer them in turn. Next up is our first panel, Society Ripe for Change. For this panel, we are joined by 4 distinguished scholars: Professor Kazem Kazarunian, former Dean of University of Connecticut's College of Engineering, Dr. Hossein Saidian, a professor of computer science at the University of Kansas, and Dr. Ashraf Zadshir, core faculty in a family medicine residency program. Moderating today's panel is Ms. Seema Yazdani, Executive Director of AI Technology and Solutions. She is pursuing her doctorate in integrated health solutions and AI at Arizona State University. Please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Good morning, everyone. Honorable guests and distinguished scholars, members of our panel, Society Ripe for Change. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Sami, for that inspiring lead-in. And profound gratitude to the National Council of Resistance of Iran, Washington office for this convention, elevating the Iranian people's unyielding stand against tyranny on the global stage. The world is finally watching. Today, we frame Iran's seismic shift, a nation on the edge of transformational change. Over 4 decades of repression and corruption have cracked the regime's facade, forging unbreakable solidarity among people, diaspora, and organized resistance. This isn't fleeting unrest. It's the maturation of social readiness for overthrow. Guided by clear inquiries, questions we will be addressing on the panel are: 1, what sustains discontent? What are the root causes? 2, how does the discontent manifested? What are the signs and signals? 3, where is the role and influence of the opposition? Where is it headed? We will hear more about this fact-based research from our scholars on the panel who have dissected the data, trends, and lived truth. No speculation, no slogans, just evidence, illuminating history's pivot. This moment is not an echo. It's Iran's thunderous call for rebirth. Witness the convergence, Iran's fury, women's fearless vanguard, resistance iron organization, and the mullah's widening fissures. The regime, marred by tyrannical terrorism, massacres, and the world's highest executions, crumbles, yet uprising escalates. From 2022's national uprisings, blaze to today's tipping point. Isolation breeds desperation. This demands our advocacy, a clear-eyed look at scholarly data exposing the regime's fragility. Iran isn't imploding, it's igniting toward a democratic, secular, non-nuclear republic. Why now? Because history whispers. Ignored sparks become infernos. Let's explore why this inflection reshapes the world and why we must act. Let's take a look at a historical analogy. Envision America's 1776 forge, Enlightenment's fire, patriots' courage, from Jefferson's bold pen to farmers' grit, exposing injustice, massacres, and unyielding oppression. A coalition of statesmen, scholars, intellectuals, militias bled for the Bill of Rights, inalienable freedoms over monarchical fiat. Letters smuggled, ideas ignited, reason triumphed over blind faith. Iran burns that same flame. The MEK and National Council of Resistance, they are the opposition's beating heart. Underground cells to excite visionaries, enduring 47 years of torture with no hate, only hope. Jefferson nailed it. Enlightened reason must prevail over blind faith. That's Iran's method. Protest as pamphlets, resistance as midnight rides. From tyranny's chains to a republic's dawn, America seized it. Iran won't wait. If not now, when? If not us, who? This panel delivers that evidence, presenting three perspectives dissecting Iran's readiness through empirical rigor. Let's begin with our voices, setting the context and sharing perspectives and insight. First, Professor Kazarunian will cover social and economic drivers of this content. What sustains this content? Professor Kazarunian, a globally recognized engineering leader and former dean of UConn's College of Engineering, a fellow of ASME and AIMBE, he's advised over 50 organizations on robotics, design automation, and strategic planning. Dr. Hossein Saidian, a professor of computer science at the University of Kansas with over 170 publications in software engineering and cybersecurity. And Dr. Ashraf Zadshir, a physician, educator, and clinical researcher, core faculty in a family medicine residency program. She is the recipient of California Women of the Year Award and has authored numerous peer-reviewed studies and medical textbooks. Okay, Dr. Kazarunian.
Thank you, Ms. Yazdani. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to be with you today, to be among you. It is an honor to be one of you. And it's also a distinct privilege for me to be able to present the results of the research of a group, a team of scholars, colleagues that work on the project being presented today. Let me frame the conversation today by defining three mega trends, mega economic trends in Iran. Iran's economic collapse is structural. It is not temporary, and by no means it is the result of the sanctions. Economy has become a tool for repression and plunder, a tool for looting the country. And economic discontent has turned into a revolutionary force. It is accelerating towards a total regime collapse. And these megatrends manifest themselves in many areas, including income, inflation, oil, employment, banks, taxes, the private sector, inequity, housing, nuclear costs, and many other areas. We'll talk about some of them now. Let's start with GDP. That shows the scale of economic crisis. Gross domestic product in Iran is now ranked 117th per capita in the world. This is a shameful ranking to have for a resource-rich country like Iran. Our food inflation is close to 60%. Medicine has been up for about 700 to 800 times over the last 3 to 4 years. Close to 80% of the Iranians live below the poverty line. Long breadlines, kidney cell signs, prostitution on the streets. These are all signs of a total moral collapse for the country. Inequity in housing, it is extreme. When I was putting this slide together, it brought tears to my eyes. The rich people, the mafia that owns Iran in many ways, the Aghazadeha on one side, and then you look at the poor people and how they live and extreme conditions of their living. 1% of the country owns more than 30% of the riches of the country. More than half of the people in Iran practically don't own anything. Looking at the oil, it is either a trap for, it's actually more of a trap for the economy of the country. Oil is about 60% of the government's revenue and about 80% of the exports in Iran. That means that for every $1 in the price of crude oil, there is a fluctuation of $1 billion in the income for the country. And that shock exposure is extreme. And that practically means that Iran's economy is based on luck rather than strategic planning. Average worker earns about $150 to $200 per month, among the lowest in the world. Income stagnation has been persisting since 1980s. Casualization means switching and shifting from permanent positions to temporary hire, and migration to cities are resulting trends. And only 2.4 million jobs have been created in 16 years. That is about 150,000 jobs per year. To put that in context, that is 1/10 of the jobs that a country the size of Iran needs. About 13 million people are unemployed. That is nearly half of the workforce. Nearly 80% of the workforce of the Iranians lack stable jobs. An economy has been practically become a military oligarchy. Sepah Pastaran, IRGC, officially controls 1/3 of the economy. The actual number is closer to 60%, and they own half of the oil exports. This leads to a vicious cycle of plunder, repression, leading to more plunder. And nuclear cost, since 1990s in Iran, is estimated to be about $2 trillion. That is that's a resource that could have been used to build the country. Instead, it has led to more isolation and more repression. And looking at the banking situation, that's not a better picture either. Bank Milli Iran, National Bank of Iran, its capital adequacy is -5%. Capital adequacy, CAR, is a ratio that is used to measure the health of a banking system. Bank Sepah Bank, it has a capital adequacy ratio of -23%. That means that practically these two banks are bankrupt. They're operating in bankruptcy. Very similar to IND Bank that was bankrupt a couple of months ago. And all of these banks are suffering because of the toxic assets, unpaid loans, and corrupted internal loans that are given to the ruling regime. The capital adequacy ratio actually for a healthy bank in the world is about 10%. Taxes is another story. Taxes have quadrupled over the last few years. They are now 4 times the income that the government has from oil. What that means is that the poor in the country is financing the repression and financing the plunder of the country. And the small business, ease of doing business in Iran is ranked by IMF to be 127th out of 190. Again, a miserable, shameful position to have. And most of it is because of the dominance of state-owned pseudo companies. And ideas like innovation, business development, business planning, those ideas are unheard of in a small business environment in Iran. So in closing, Plunder, repression, and nuclear ambitions and proxy wars are deepening the poverty in Iran. Reform is impossible without totally collapsing this regime and rebuild again. Iran's social fabric is breaking under the weight of inequity, and finally, discontent has become defiance and resistance, and that is leading to an accelerating path towards total regime collapse. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kazarunian. Your insights on the economic stranglehold, the plunder, the lost jobs, the stolen futures, reveal why this discontent isn't just simmering. It's boiling over. We appreciate that unflinching analysis. Dr. Saidian, please share how these burdens are pushing Iran toward real change. How is it manifested? Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Yazbani. Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be in this great convention, and thank you to all of you for coming here today. Before I start, I would like to emphasize that our team, as Professor Kazarunian stated, have done extensive research. However, because of the limitation of time, we will not be able to present everything here. However, all of the data, all of our references, etc., will be published on the NCRI's US's website immediately after the conference. So let me start. My presentation addresses the core foundational problem of the Iranian regime, and that is its illegitimacy. It has never been a legitimate government. Let's be clear. The Khomeini regime was not the legitimate choice after the 1979 revolution. He stole the revolution. The Shah's dictatorship had eliminated all genuine democratic groups and organizations. A power vacuum had been created, and Khomeini exploited that vacuum. Khomeini's rule was ahistorical. It ran entirely counter to the 120-year arc of Iranian history, which consisted of continuous struggle for democracy, secularism, freedom. That struggle has continued since the constitutional revolution of 1906. A regime with no democratic mandate must find other ways to survive. Because it cannot rule by the ballot box, it built its identity on 3 pillars: internal repression, export of revolution, or better known as export of terrorism, and development of nuclear weapons, which was supposed to guarantee its survival. I will argue that this regime has miserably lost in all of those fronts. Let's start with the most visible failure, the Iranian regime's nuclear project. The regime wanted this project to be its ultimate guarantor of survival. But this project was stopped dead in its track, not by a foreign intelligence agency, but by the Iranian resistance itself. In 2012, the NCRI US delivered a breakthrough revelation of the secret Natanz site. This courageous act of patriotic intelligence. Let me repeat that. This courageous act of patriotic intelligence exposed the mullahs to the world. That moment changed everything. It put a tightening rope around the regime that has never been fully removed, leading to crippling international sanctions and, of course, diplomatic isolation. The pillar that meant to provide strength only provided vulnerability. The world has become much safer because the Iranian regime's nuclear project was exposed. And as a result, the world owes a big thank you to the NCRI US. However, we, and of course the international community, must remain highly vigilant. There should be absolutely no opportunity for the Iranian regime to ever have any kind of access to nuclear weapons. Now, what about the export of revolution, or actually export of terrorism? This was meant to be the regime's primary tool for projecting regional dominance. For decades, this meant the plundering of national wealth, billions of dollars which were meant for infrastructure, which were meant for hospitals, for health, for education, was stolen from the Iranian people to fund terror groups. Their biggest gamble, the regime's biggest gamble, was pouring money and manpower into saving Bashar Assad's brutal dictatorship. And what is the result? Total strategic failure. The Assad regime is gone. The entire Hezbollah leadership has been eliminated, and other proxy groups are scattered and are under severe pressure to dismantle. This pillar brought neither power nor influence, only more international isolation and, of course, the hatred of the neighbors. We now turn to the third pillar, and the most telling sign of the regime's weakness. It's escalating repression. The numbers on this slide are shocking for a reason. We have seen executions triple during the past 3 years, from 553 to over 1,600. And these are, of course, only the executions that we know about. With over 5,000 people on death row and 2 million arrests every year, the judiciary in Iran is not about justice. It is about repression. It is a fear factory. This is not a strength. This is a desperate grip of a regime whose only remaining language remains pure violence. This slide, please pay attention, this slide illustrates the extreme measure used to suppress even the slightest association with the MEK. We see individuals who were recently executed, like Mr. Hassani and Mr. Ehsani, and others facing imminent execution, like Mr. Wafai Sani, and 16 others who are under death penalty, simply for expressing support for the MEK. Equally shocking are the lengthy prison terms. For example, 2 recognized Olympiad winners were given 16-year sentences only because they expressed support for MEK. No physical activities, no activities other than just showing support for the MEK. Maryam Akbari is serving 17 years for seeking justice for her siblings who were executed during the 1980s, and they were, of course, affiliated with the MEK. How does a regime with these gross human rights violations try to hide their crime? They have tried to build a digital wall of censorship and control. Iran is ranked 177th out of 180 for press freedom, and its internet score is a dismal 16 out of 100. They block all popular platforms and websites. Why? Because they cannot let the truth about their corruptions, about their crimes, about their repression to get out. And of course, they do not want the videos of protests to get out either. Like all dictatorship, they try to control information. They have some 18 units, 18 institutions dedicated to monitoring online activity. But as we will discuss later, this information control is not working. This regime's brutality is not limited to political opponents. It also heavily targets minorities, ethnicities, and different minorities. Minorities like Baluchis and Kurds face horrific discrimination. Consider this chilling statistics. The Baluchi community constitutes only 5% of the population, yet they account for 20% of executions in Iran. As if political repression wasn't enough, the country's environment and infrastructure are collapsing due to decades of mismanagement and corruption. Iran is facing a severe water crisis. The per capita availability has dropped by 80%, despite having the world's second largest natural gas reserve. The people suffer daily from gas and electricity shortages. The environmental degradation is catastrophic. 90% of wetlands are critical, and cities suffer from toxic air pollution over 2/3 of the year. So let's bring all of this together. We have detailed a regime sustained only by execution, censorship, and economic and environmental ruin. But the most important point is that despite all of this, the Iranian people are more defiant than ever. You can see this defiance in the growth of organized resistance units, and you can hear in the brave public chants of death to Khamenei across all of the cities. This converging crisis have created a society that is boiling over. The regime has shown it can only destroy. It cannot govern. And the people are showing us that an explosion of freedom is not just possible, it is inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saidian, for your breakdown of these raw manifestations, the protests, the boycotts, the unbreaking spirit. Paint a vivid picture of a people rising as one. Thank you for that clarity. Dr. Ashraf Zadshir, your perspective will light the path forward. Thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Ladies, gentlemen, honorable guests, it's an honor to be here today. My colleagues, give me a second. My colleagues have outlined the regime's profound economic, social, political, and legitimacy crisis. I will now examine how these crises have manifested in their most consequential form, sustained revolt. From isolated protest grown into a sustained, organized challenge to the regime's survival. Let's focus on three defining uprisings that together mark a turning point from which regime cannot return. Three nationwide revolts shaking all 31 provinces. Revolts from 2017, 2019, and 2022. Different triggers, one demand: an end to clerical rule. Each one ended a fallacy, a myth. Let's start with 2017. The December 2017 uprising marked a turning point. Within a few days, protests spread to 142 cities, led by young, educated, and unemployed Iranians. The key slogan, reformer, hardliner, the game is now over, captured a new reality. A rejection of change from within and open defiance of supreme leader. The 2017 uprising shattered the regime's four-decade narrative of competing factions. Iranians made clear that they have moved beyond the regime's manufactured divisions and now reject the system in its entirety. In November 2019, a sudden fuel price hike ignited Iran's largest uprising in 4 decades, spreading to over 200 cities. Protests went beyond the street, striking regime strongholds, basic bases, police stations, Friday prayer offices, and a state bank, symbols of repression and corruption. The crackdown was ruthless. 1,500 killed, thousands arrested. That uprising ended the myth that lower economic class, the underprivileged, supported the regime, a myth that was also promoted in the West. 2 years later, September 2022, the death of Mahsa Amini, a young Kurdish woman, triggered a nationwide movement spanning 280 cities. This time, the message was unmistakable. The slogan, "Down with the oppressor, be it the Shah or the leader," summed up a national consensus, rejection of all forms of dictatorship. Whether monarchical or theocratic. Women and youth stood at the forefront, leading chants, organizing online, and facing bullets with courage. 1,500 demonstrators killed, 90,000 young Iranians were detained. And of course, over 300 IRGC members were killed. This was no longer about reform. It was a generational rebellion demanding complete political change. As you have seen, down with oppressor, be it the Shah or the leader. Today, opposition reached far beyond the streets. MEK-affiliated resistance units, now active across more than 31 provinces, have evolved into a structured and organized resistance force, energizing communities, sustaining defiance, shattering the wall of repression, and igniting nationwide uprising. Within last year alone, the resistance units have carried out over 39,000 acts of defiance, including 3,000 attacks on IRGC and Basij bases across all 31 provinces. Election boycotts have become another weapon of resistance, with voter turnout dropping to as low as 8 to 10%, the regime's political facade is collapsing. Across these years, a clear cycle has emerged: grievance, repression, economic plunder, renewed grievance. The regime's survival strategy, built on repression, corruption, and proxy militias, ironically, creates the very conditions that reignite rebellion. Every crackdown deepens poverty and anger. Every protest crushed sows the seeds of the next one. In short, the regime's logic of survival has become its logic of self-destruction. To conclude, Iran's opposition has evolved from scattered protests to a permanent state of defiance. It is younger, more educated, and more conscious than ever before. It rejects both monarchy and theocracy, demanding a democratic, secular republic. The real question now is not whether another uprising will happen, but when, and whether the world will be ready to recognize and support the Iranian people's demand for freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rzadchi. Your examination of the opposition's rising power and the regime's dead end path gives us not just analysis, but hope grounded in facts. Thank you all three for this powerhouse discussion. It's exactly why we are here. We didn't come for comfort. We came for the truth, and it's ugly. The economy is gutted, the water is gone, hospitals ration hope. Regime's tools, internet kills, public gallows, midnight raids, but look past the rubble, protests swell, women walk fearless, kids chant in streets. MEK's resistance units, echoes of Paul Revere, one rider, one whisper, world changed. Data says the regime is losing. Defections, cash runs dry, control slips. Scholars just proved the arc of history, it's bending. Foundations exist, rule of law, elected councils, zero nukes, no dictatorship survives if Iranians refuse to bow. Jefferson was right, reason over faith. America tore off its chains once, Iran's doing it, live streaming it on mobiles. This isn't the end. It's Iran's constitution. It's the Bill of Rights. It's shot at breathing free. Towards the Iran's democratic revolution, fiercely together. So we would like to end with a few questions from the audience. It seems we've received a lot of flood of questions, but one question that's on many minds, and perhaps one that defines our moment, is when an economy built on plunder finally collapses, how do we even begin to rebuild? Is it possible at all, or has the damage gone too far? Dr. Kazrin, with you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thanks. So after the regime collapse, I think the transitional government and all the governments after that must make radical transparency their capital. That radical transparency is what is needed to build trust. That's what's needed to eradicate corruption. Build the trust that is required itself is a prerequisite to bring burnt generations, as they call them in Iran now, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, and now very soon Generation Alpha, back to the productive ranks. That trust is needed to bring many millions of Iranians in diaspora back to either on temporary basis or more permanent basis, connect them with motherland, connect them with productivity in Iran, convince them to start investing in Iran. That is the trust that is needed to actually reintegrate Iran in the world. But then immediately right after that, the transitional government needs to attend to the needs of the 80% that are below poverty line. We need to do probably what President Roosevelt did to bring America out of 1930s depression. Large-scale public works, but it has to be radically, again, distributed. It cannot be Tehran-centric. It has to be people-centric. It has to be in places that the work is needed. That's how you create immediately millions of jobs. But then beyond that and long-term, absolutely we can catch up. We cannot catch up to the rest of the world that we are behind by many decades, but we can catch up by changing the game and changing the game plan. We have to leapfrog technology. We have to create a knowledge-based economy. We have to create digital manufacturing versus the traditional 1970s and 80s manufacturing. And ironically, we actually have an advantage because we don't need to deal with legacy industry, the industries of 70s and 80s that we need to replace. We can start afresh. We have to we have to develop digital manufacturing. We have to have digital twins in almost every organization that we build. We have to have a smart agriculture, AI-supported agriculture, drone-supported agriculture. We need to have platforms, digital platforms for rapid reskilling the labor. So there are so many things that we can do to create that leapfrog leap. I hope that answers part of the question.
Yes, definitely. One more question from the audience. What is the event that needs to occur for regime change, and how close is it from happening? What are the gauges or signals?
Was that for me? Could you repeat it one more time, please?
What is the event that needs to occur for regime change, and how close is it from happening? What are the gauges and signals?
Okay, well, for the regime change, right?
Yes.
Of course, we see the contentions, we see the people on the street, we see the chants, we see the extensive network of resistant units that are very active. And we know that the society is ready for explosion. We have seen the episodes in, for example, last 2-3 uprising, and each and every one of them became stronger. It was widespread, and of course, the Iranian regime tried to suppress it a lot more violently. But the point is that we know that there is going to be a next one, and the next one, it's definitely going to, if it's not going to be the final one, it will be a turning point. So the very fact that the resistant units are highly active inside Iran, it is a representative sign that the society does want to change, and that change is taking place. We can also look at the regimes infighting among themselves. So each unit is basically very opposed to the other unit. So these are also signs of this not being stable, not being cohesive, not having a policy where all elements of the regime agree on. So in going back to, for example, 1979, these are the signs that the regime is collapsing.
Thank you, Dr. Saeedian. Thank you. With the time, we have to close the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our panel one speakers for their incisive analysis and powerful framing of Iran's internal crises. Now we turn to our second panel, Iranian women and the legacy of resistance. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will turn to one of the most transformative forces driving change in Iran, Iranian women. We are honored to welcome 4 extraordinary women whose achievements embody the spirit of resistance and renewal. Hananeh Amanpour, a respected attorney practicing family, domestic relations, and business law in Northern Virginia. Dr. Azadeh Sami is a board-certified pediatrician with a master's in public health and over a decade of clinical experience. Dr. Azadeh Zangineh is an internal medicine physician based in Cleveland, Ohio. And moderating this panel is Dr. Ramesh Sepehrad, a scholar practitioner and leading authority on cybersecurity, conflict resolution, and Iran policy. Please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Gentlemen, I'm hoping that my mic is excellent. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for choosing to be with us today. And I do want to commend the National Council of Resistance of Iran for hosting this amazing convention. And of course, my compliments to the previous panel. Thank you for your insightful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to our second panel to discuss the women's rise from resistance to leadership, legacy of resistance. So our panel will focus on the highlights of Iranian women and the enduring legacy of the resistance, which really dates back to more than 100 years. I think the previous panel was referring to the 1906 constitutional movement, and we will be remiss not to mention that even though that women played a very strong role in that movement, they were marginalized. They were marginalized as part of the Article 2 in that constitution, where the women did not gain the full citizenship. So as you can imagine, Iranian women have been at this fight for a long time. And of course, over the years, whether it was under the Pahlavi monarchy or under the current theocracy, the violence against women evolved over time. And we are going to be discussing how, despite all the brutal violence, the Iranian women continue to endure, continue to be empowered, and continue to reach a leadership that we see today. So I think just to kind of level set our discussion this morning, I think it's important for us to also recognize, I know the previous panel talked about the uprising of 2022, which happened after the killing of the innocent Kurdish girl, Mahsa Jina Amini. And the world really took a point of noticing the role of women and the youth during that uprising. And I think what's really important for us is, as we look back, is to not think about the role of women and youth in that uprising as a spontaneous and overnight development. It was actually lots of work that had gone in to reach that explosion point so that the international community could actually recognize how impactful the women's role in transforming Iran is. So I think, again, it's extremely important that we understand how Iranian women have become a decisive force for change, a change for a democratic Iran, and a change that is really an inclusive change. We see women from all walks of life. We see women from all different parts of Iranian nationality: Azeri, Turk, Kurd, Baluchi, Lor. Every nationality of the Iranian population and the country is represented among the ranks and file of the Iranian resistance. So I know the previous panel spoke tremendously about the role of Iran's main opposition group, the MEK, and how important they are in transforming what is happening in the society that is striving for change. Today, though, we are going to be talking about the culture that turned generation of repressed women to organized leadership that has structure, strategy, and purpose. The central question then becomes that how does this leadership evolve over time, and how does it resonate through multi-generational over the last 46 years, as well as you add on the previous 100 years since the 1906, as we learn lessons from previous leaders, previous women who fought against the various forms of tyranny in Iran. So the women of MEK and the broader NCRI coalition have shown that the discipline and sacrifice and strategic clarity have defined the movement for decades. And we have acknowledged that the regime has responded with brutality. There are no other countries in the world that has executed more women than the Iranian regime. That is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. But it's also a fact that it shows that Iranian women are not giving up. They're fighting, they're resilient, they're organized, they have a vision, they have strategy, they have a roadmap, and more importantly, they have a leader. That's right. They have a leader that had talked about a 10-point plan as referred to in the previous panel. So in this conversation, we are looking at how Iranian women become the core of the resistance, how they have sustained their activism, and how they have endured unimaginable repression, yet they have risen to leadership. So I am honored to be joined by Dr. Azadeh Sami and Hanane Amanpour, attorney and women's rights activist, and Dr. Azadeh Zangine. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I do want to remind everyone to please use your QR code to send in your questions. We will welcome your questions after we go through our moderated session of our panel. So, Dr. Sami, let me start with you first. I really would love for you to kind of set up the historical context for us. Can you share with us the journey and the turning point that has helped the women of Iran to break the barriers, to see the result of the leadership that we see today?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Seferat, for that very, very important question. As you said, the leadership of women did not come without struggle, and it certainly did not come overnight. To really understand women's leadership in Iran's resistance, we must first look at the patterns of oppression that have occurred over the last century. Under the monarchy, elite women had selective visibility, but politically active women faced constant surveillance, arrest, torture, execution, and exile. Then the clerical regime came and converted misogyny into state doctrine with the compulsory hijab, with the discriminatory family laws, and gender apartheid. All of these became tools of political control. Since then, from early on, the regime imprisoned, tortured, executed, and massacred women. And this was all because the regime felt and still feels threatened by women. They knew that women's emancipation means the end of tyranny. So you could say that this journey of oppression brought out the women's strength and potential. So they joined resistance organizations, especially the MEK, in large numbers in the early 80s. Many of them faced cultural backlash at home for being politically active. I'm talking about mothers, sisters, wives, daughters. But they persisted. So what did the MEK do? And this was brilliant. They formulated and they formally implemented an emancipatory leadership framework that put qualified, committed women in senior, strategic, and operational roles. So this created a real pathway for women to lead, to organize, and to command. Now, 30 years later, this has made the MEK the longest running women-led movement in the region.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to double down on that. I don't think across the international community, any other country has such a powerful movement of women that has been so enduring for so many years.
That is absolutely
indeed.
Right. That's absolutely right. I mean, this framework is actually the secret sauce behind the movement's multi-generational appeal inside Iran and across the diaspora for women and girls. So how does this framework look today? We have women who are operational leaders inside and outside of Iran. The resistance units contain a strong female core, and this is something that the regime has actually confessed. And the diaspora rallies show powerful cross-generational participation of youth, women, and girls. So in short, we can say that it was this systemic oppression that allowed the leaders to emerge. That not only that, the MEK created the structure to empower these women. This is the egalitarian path toward a free, democratic Iran that is lived in practice and not just in theory.
This is great. Thank you, Dr. Sami. Ms. Amanpour, I want to turn to you next. I do want to talk about the violence against women, both under the Shah and under the current regime. Dr. Sami just referred to some of that. I know your focus has been on institutionalized gender inequality in Iran under this current regime. Can you talk about that? And also, I do want to talk about those women who have risen to resist this regime.
how did they come under attack by this regime, above and beyond the torture and the executions that they faced?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Separad. That's a very important question, and thank you for having me here on the panel today. I think it's important to remember that at its foundation, the Islamic Republic is founded on gender-segregated law. It is, in fact, enshrined in the Constitution under the Velayat Faqih, where women's rights, both in their personal lives and in their public lives, are completely governed by the government. So in their personal lives, we see incidents of marriage and divorce, custody, inheritance, things of that nature. We see that women's rights are denied to them. They have no equal rights under the law. And in the public sphere, we see, women are not allowed to be president. They're not allowed to be judges. And so they're not allowed any sort of real positions of power within the public sphere. And so none of this is an accident, right? This is completely by design. The regime intended in its constitution to keep women from having any sort of equal rights under the law. Yet somehow we continue to see Iranian women finding their way to the front lines of the resistance. And it's sort of this amazing phenomenon of how it is that comes to be. So I think within the MEK, we can look at a really sort of brilliant model of how that came to be. Starting in the early 80s, in 1985, we started to see women being put into positions of, political, diplomatic, organizational power and whatnot within the MEK. And then in 1993, we actually see Mrs. Maryam Rajavi become the president-elect of the NCRI. And so what this demonstrates within the MEK is this model that is representative of what is to come, what the potential is for Iran after the democratic transition, and what we can potentially see for Iranian women inside of Iran. Sadly, this progress that we see has not come with any small sacrifice. Within the MEK, we often see not only is the MEK routinely demonized by the regime and their supporters, we see this emphasis on the women members of the MEK, where they're most targeted for the sacrifices that they've made. And again, this is not a mistake. This is by design, and it's intended to sort of confront this tried and true egalitarian model that they've put into place that demonstrates that you can, in fact, have a society with equal rights under the law for everyone. And so that's why they're targeted. And so one of the most cynical lines of attack that we see routinely coming from the regime is the attacks against mothers and women that are, family members that are members of the MEK. And this is, they're sort of portrayed as these women that are abandoning their more, role as a mother or as a family member and whatnot, and sort of abandoning what it is that they feel like they should be doing, as opposed to leading the revolution, which is what they're actually doing. And they're painted in this picture where they're, cult-like and things of that nature, which is entirely untrue. Now, this is in stark contrast to other roles that we've seen for women across the world and other anti-authoritarian movements. So we see, for example, in South Africa, in the anti-apartheid movement, in the French Revolution, and World War II women activists, the Ukrainian women, things like that. They're sort of propped up as doing what needs to be done and being on the front lines, and they're respected for those positions, where in stark contrast we see the Iranian women are demonized for doing exactly the same thing,
So there is a double standard.
There is absolutely a double standard there, where we see that the Iranian women are being painted in this negative light in stark contrast to their female counterparts in other parts of the world.
This is really important.
This is the cultural transformation. This is the cultural revolution that the women of MEK have launched, yet instead of being celebrated, they're being demonized for the courage that they have because they broke the traditions. They broke the tradition of being a mom, stay-home wife, and subdued daughter or sisters, and they went straight to the front line to fight against this regime.
They did. They absolutely did. They absolutely did. And I think that what demonstrates is that women's rights is not sort of this ancillary issue to the freedom of the Iranian people. It is at the forefront of that because the Islamic Republic was built exactly on that principle. And to say that there is some version of democracy that works without that goes against any principle of democracy. And this is exactly why the regime has gone, for all of these decades, has gone so far out of its way to paint Iranian women in a very different light than what they actually are.
Well said. So I think you both spoke about the misogyny in power, and of course, more importantly, the revolution of women to fight against that misogyny. So Dr. Zanganeh, I want to turn to you. I know as a teenager, you lived in Iran for 2 years. Yeah. So you actually experienced seeing the IRGC and the paramilitary Basijis in the streets and how they treat women. Can you talk about that? And also, tell us what keeps the women of Iran going?
Yes, good morning, and thank you. I'd like to start with something personal, just because it's shaped my understanding of what it really means to navigate life in Iran as a girl and as a woman. I grew up in the United States. I am a first-generation Iranian American. We have all the freedoms that a lot of us take for granted here. And I found myself as a young teenager basically transplanted in Iran in a middle school, a very ordinary middle school, fully immersed, speaking Farsi as the only language, and following all the rules and expectations that are expected in an all-girls middle school in Iran. And what I very quickly observed is how prominent the repression is. It's not something abstract there. It's something that they live by every day, every decision they make, every move they make, every choice that they make, they are under severe repression. And growing up there, I watched this, up close, firsthand, in so many ways, big and small. You're kind of encouraged to stay quiet, agree, not ask questions. And womanhood in Iran is essentially something that's to be managed or controlled.
Or defined by a man.
Defined by men, exactly. And being somebody that grew up in America where the opposite is true, I had a hard time accepting that. And a lot of girls do. And I just remember, excuse me, and I just remember thinking how different it felt, moving from a childhood where our freedoms are they shape our reality here, to somewhere like Iran, where girls didn't really grasp even the concept of freedom. And I think that reality has really, it connects to the deeper history of Iranian women and their pivotal roles as the backbone of every major movement for change, from the 1906 constitutional revolution to the struggle against the monarchy to the 1980s crackdown and to the most recent crackdowns. The theme here is that women have led these revolutions. The MEK's women-led model is an extension and an elevation of this historical struggle. For decades, women inside Iran and inside the MEK have held real leadership, not symbolic, but in practice. in operational roles, strategic roles, roles that require a lot of discipline, sacrifice, and vision. This organization has really broken the glass ceiling when it comes to women in leadership. They hold key roles, and this wasn't incidental. It was a strategic correction to male-dominated norms inside and outside Iran, and as a revolutionary necessity to break free from the patriarchal norms and foundation for building a true democratic Iran. And I think this is a key ingredient.
And in your view, you believe this is what keeps the Iranian women going?
I think so. I think that it's a combination of their lived truth and a lived example. They see that this is possible. They know the injustice is real. They've experienced it. They live it every day. But they also know that leadership is possible. They've seen it modeled by these Iranian women that came before them. And I think that combination, clarity about the present and confidence in a different future, is what keeps them moving forward.
Exactly. Despite the fear, despite the oppression, despite the cultural upbringing to make them believe they are second-class citizens, Iranian women are putting this regime in its own place because they have agency, because they believe in equality, and they have leadership. Quite impressive. So, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to switch the conversation to a very important topic, the topic of hijab, the topic of women's choice to wear or not to wear the Islamic cover. Some call it oppressive, some call it liberating. Personally, I believe it's nobody's business what women wear because it is the women's choice. But for the sake of discussion, let's have the conversation because I think this is one of the issues that the Iranian regime and the monarchists and the revisionists have used as a way to demonize and undermine the true power of the women of the MEK and the Iranian resistance. So Dr. Sami, let me start with you. Give me your thoughts about the issue of hijab.
Well, as you said, this is not only an important question, it's also a question that is very, comes up in debates often. And it's kind of complicated, but the way I see it is, obviously it's a very sensitive topic. The debate over the hijab in Iran is often just framed too narrowly because it's not about the fabric itself. And this is key, but it's the question of choice and political agency. That's what it's about. Over the past century in Iran, women's bodies have essentially been a battleground for asserting power. Under Reza Shah in 1936, women were forced to unveil, and actually many veiled girls were pulled out of school. Then the clerical regime comes 40 years later and forces the veiling and turns it into a pillar of political control. So what do these two scenarios have in common? They both deny women the right to choose. So when Iranian women are demanding freedom, they're not just simply debating dress codes. They're challenging a state compulsion in all of its forms. And their demands go far beyond hijab, and it reflects a broader struggle for equality, dignity, and participation in public life. This is also why, when we look at Maryam Rajavi's point of view, it's very clear, as she says, no to compulsory hijab, no to compulsory religion, no to compulsory government. And at the heart of this statement is the notion of choice and rights. The MEK actually brought this position into action. In '79, just weeks after the fall of the Shah's regime, the MEK were the first to step up and openly oppose compulsory hijab inside Iran. Following this was an institutional shift where the movement essentially reorganized itself so that women could lead at every level, as mentioned before by my colleague, strategic, political, and organizational. So this was not just about representation, it was about transforming the culture of decision-making so that equality became effectively demonstrated. Politically, the hijab is just one element within a century-long fight against imposed identity. Iranian women are not asking for permission. They're claiming their rights. They're claiming their rights, whether veiled or unveiled, to be full, equal, and self-determining citizens. In Iran today, women are shouting, with hijab, without hijab, let's march to a revolution. And that basically sums it up.
Indeed. Well said. Ms. Amanpour, I want to turn to you. Your thoughts on hijab?
Well, first I want to start off by saying I'd like to sort of double down on what Dr. Sami has just discussed here, but also to sort of dig into things a little bit more. I think that what's most often discussed and what is misconstrued is that when we see slogans like women, resistance, freedom, sometimes that is misconstrued as being an anti-hijab movement, and that is in fact not the case. When we look at what hijab is intended to do, hijab is intended to be, it's not intended to be a tool of repression, it's intended to be a tool of empowerment. And so what it does is it creates an opportunity for a woman to choose what portions of herself, what parts of herself she wants to share with the world. It is in fact supposed to be, bring freedom and choice for a woman. And so there really is no conflict between a woman that says, I choose to wear hijab, or the woman that says, I choose not to wear hijab. Because at the end of the day, what is important is that it is their choice of how and what parts of themselves they want to present to the world. And I think that what's also important to remember is that for a woman that wears hijab, to have hijab be compulsory is equally insulting and equally oppressive as it is to the woman who doesn't wear hijab. By making it compulsory, what is intended at its core to be a choice for that woman is no longer a choice, just as much as it's not a choice for the woman who doesn't want to wear hijab and is forced to do so. Neither of those women is given a choice. So, when I look at my sister in the revolution who does wear hijab and my sister in the revolution who does not wear hijab, there's absolutely no conflict there between them. And we can equally fight for women's rights under the law, where everyone has the choice to wear whatever it is that they want to wear and whatever it is that makes them feel most, powerful and confident in this world.
Indeed. So I really hope we have put that issue to rest. And I think from this point on, if a man asks why the MEK women are wearing a hijab, I would simply say it is none of your business. And if a woman asks why MEK women are wearing a hijab, I would simply say, welcome the conversation. Let's sit down and talk about choice. So let's shift the conversation Dr. Zanganeh, I want to talk to you about what does the future hold. Talk about women in the future of Iran.
Yes, thank you. And it's an honor to be here to talk about that. When we talk about rebuilding Iran after the dictatorship, I think we have to start with a simple reality, and that's that women have already been holding the country together in so many ways, in the absence of freedom. They've carried the social, moral, practical weight of daily life under repression. And even under repression, they've carried the work of care, community, stability, and their dignity. They've protected their families, they've educated their children, supported the sick, all of this under this repression. And because of that, they need to be central to rebuilding the country the moment the space opens and the space for change opens. And additionally, it needs to be a cultural shift. Boys and girls must grow up seeing women lead publicly, not just privately, but in a real way. And this is how a democratic cultural shift takes place and takes root. Another important point I think to make is that to really close the gaps in representation, change must be structural. So equal legal access to leadership roles, transparent paths into the government, public service, decision-making authority, not just participation, must be guaranteed. And it's important to recognize that while this isn't happening in Iran, it's happening in parallel outside of Iran through this organization, the MEK and NCRI. They've built a women-led leadership model long before it became, politically fashionable to talk about gender equality. Beginning in the mid-1980s, they made structural decisions, not just symbolic ones, to place qualified women in senior leadership, political, military, diplomatic, and administrative roles. And by 1993, with Mrs. Mariam Rajavi elected as president-elect of the NCRI, gender equality became a governing principle, not just a promise for later. So in a post-dictatorship Iran, women will not begin leading for the first time. They will continue leading as they have in movements, in exile communities, in families, in resistance networks, and across 3 generations. The task ahead is not to just include women, but to recognize the leadership they've already built and to make it the foundation of a democratic future.
Exactly. And all of which has been reflected in Mariam Rajavi's women's empowerment plan that she has presented. So I know we're coming up on time. I do want to do a rapid fire question because unfortunately we don't have any time to take questions from the audience, but our speakers will be available if anyone would like to have a one-on-one discussion with them after the panel. But let me start with a rapid fire question. If you were, Ms. Amanpour, I'm going to start with you. If you were to choose a word to define the legacy of resistance of Iranian women, what would that be and why?
I think what has always come to mind is unwavering. I think that in the face of in the face of everything that has been put in front of Iranian women and all that they have been confronted with, whether that was under the Shah or under the current regime, one thing that never changes is this miraculous ability of the women to find themselves on the front lines despite the repression that they face. And I have never seen an Iranian woman back down from anything. And I think that that is, indicative of the culture and who we are.
All right, Dr. Sami, what's your word and why?
That's a tough question. I mean, many words come to mind, but they have so many strengths. But I think one word that probably pulls together a lot of the points that my co-panelists have brought up is fearless. because the Iranian women have confronted a system that was built to control their bodies, silence their voices, and erase their identities. But they rose, despite all that, in the streets, in classrooms, and in resistance units, challenging a regime that uses execution as a policy. Their fearlessness is what shattered these cultural barriers and proved that courage is in fact contagious. So I think that's it.
Absolutely. And we see that across multiple generations. Dr. Zangina, how about you?
That's a really difficult question because Iranian women, as we've been discussing, embody so many amazing qualities and roles. But if I had to pick one word, I would probably say trailblazers. They've been not just resisting, but they're creating, authoring, building, architecting the future. And they've broken paths where none existed. And I think with these recent protests, I think the world caught a little glimpse of what Iranian girls and women are capable of. But I really believe that moving forward, the world will look at Iranian women and their example to model what a really, truly courageous, visionary leadership can look like.
Excellent. And I dare to say all of the words that you've chosen pretty much explains and describe Ms. Maryam Rajavi. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up our panel, one thing is absolutely clear, that Iranian women are not waiting for freedom. They are leading and they are winning this fight. Because misogyny sits at the core of the regime's power, women have naturally become the central force pushing the downfall of this regime. And everything we heard today shows that the courage we see in Iran, in Iran's streets, in Iran's prison, and has grown to something much bigger, an organized, disciplined, multi-generational movement, both inside and outside of the country. First, we were reminded that the women's leadership in Iran is not new. It is built on more than a century of resistance. At every step, women have pushed back and refused to be erased and preserve their full national diversity within the rank and file of the resistance on the front line. That is the inclusivity. That is exactly what makes the movement national, strong, and united. Second, we talked about the MEK movement and how they created a culture of resistance that simply did not exist before. It is unprecedented in Iran's history, and I would dare to say across the globe. And third, we addressed the regime and how they target women so viciously, but yet because women strike at the heart of misogyny, the imprisonment, torture, smear campaigns, and execution, none of these are random, but yet the resiliency and the unwavering commitment to democracy really demonstrate women's agency, equality in action, and leadership. And finally, we underscored why women's emancipation is essential to dismantling this regime and rebuilding Iran. So with that, please help me thank our panelists today, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to our panel 2 speakers for illuminating the extraordinary role Iranian women have played in shaping resistance. Their leadership, sacrifice, and strategic vision have not only defied repression, they've helped lay the foundation for a democratic future. And now, moving on to segment 3, Voices of Iran. Shirin Nariman is a former political prisoner from Iran, human rights advocate, and entrepreneur. She holds a bachelor's degree in management, information systems, and has worked with leading wireless and financial corporations. As a business owner and lifelong learner, she continues to expand her knowledge in management and technology while using her voice to promote justice and equality. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have just a quick second, a special request that the video you are about to see is from individuals coming from inside Iran. They have risked their lives in order to speak to you today, and therefore I would request that you please not record their images or take any pictures or spread it on social media. Again, it comes at great risk to them to send these messages to us today, and I would appreciate your cooperation. Thank you.
Good morning. It is an honor to introduce this segment, Voices from Iran. My name is Shireen Nariman. I was in my senior year high school when I was arrested in November of 1980 at home by the Basiji forces. At that time, a small sense of freedom still lingered in Iran, fragile, yet alive. But even then, I have already seen blood on the streets and the bodies of those who had sacrificed their lives to protect that little freedom. In the spring of that year, I was among the first to arrive at an abandoned gas station where a young man, Nasser Mohammadi, had just been killed for distributing Mujahid, the newspaper, by the plainclothes of the regime. Only months earlier, Abbas Ommani, a laborer, while handing out electoral leaflets for Masoud Rajavi's presidential campaign, had been killed by the regime's agent. Then came Mustafa Zakeri, shot and killed during a demonstration in 1980. In this program, we focus on those voices the Iranian regime works hardest to silence: political prisoners and courageous individuals who continue to stand for freedom despite unimaginable repression. We also highlight the bravery of Iran's youth generation, those who ignite the flame of resistance across the country, fully aware of the risk of arrest, torture, imprisonment, and even execution. These resistance units embody the shape of the Iranian people for change. Many of their members are now in prison on death row, yet countless others continue to join their ranks. In recent months, Iran has seen a sharp rise in executions. In early July, an IRGC-affiliated news agency openly called for repeat of the 1988 massacre of political prisoners. Only weeks later, Mehdi Hassani and Behruz Ehsani were executed for their association with People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. To this day, at least 17 others remain on death row on the same charges. During the 2019 uprising, at least 1,500 people were massacred in the streets. In the 2022 uprising, at least 750 were killed, and 30,000 others were arrested. Many of those arrested have since been executed, while countless others remain in prison. So some now facing imminent executions. In this segment, we will watch a clip showing both the brutality of the regime and the defiance of the Iranian people.
Since the 1980s, thousands of members and supporters of the MEK were executed in prison silence. The wound never closed. Decades passed, yet the cycle endured. Arrests, prisons, executions, confronted by a will that refused to fade. In every dark turn, a network of brave hearts kept the flame alive. Where fear commanded, courage made a path. From 2017 onward, each spark met waves of detentions and indictments, yet every spark signaled continuation. In the 2019 uprising, more than 1,500 lives were taken. MEK resistance units led protests across cities nationwide, and many paid with their lives. Hossein Amini of Kermanshah, Mohammad Javad Rostami, Mariam Nouri and Mortiza Nouri in Robat Karim, Mehdad and Mahmoud Dashtiniya in Behbahan, Ali Shahsavand and Mahmoud Valiolahi in Varamin, Sajjad Rezai in Malad, Shabnam Dayani in Shiraz, Behzad Moinifar in Isfahan, Vahed Alahi from Sonkor, and many more. Their courage lit the path. Resistance units carry the torch toward freedom. In 2022, the uprising surged again. Over 750 killed, tens of thousands detained. And still that hidden flame would not go out. Behrooz Ehsani and Mehdi Hassani, MEK supporters who refused to break. From solitary cells to closed-door trials, they stood firm. I will not bargain over my life. Let it be an offering for Iran's freedom, Behrooz wrote from prison. Mehdi echoed him. They can take my breath, not my choice. At dawn, July 27, 2025, the regime executed them in Ghezel Hessar without warning to their families. But the rope couldn't silence their message. Behrooz and Mehdi are not alone. They are examples of many MEK prisoners who continue to resist, even as they live under death sentences. Somaye Rashidi was jailed for a simple act of defiance, chanting, "Death to Khamenei, hail to Mariam Rajavi." In Karchak prison, she had epilepsy. Repeated seizures were dismissed as faking, and only on September 16th was she finally taken to Mofateh Hospital. She never recovered and died on September 25th, 2025. Today, more than 17 MEK supporters are on death row, pressed brutally to recant. They remain unbowed. Zara Tabari, tried in a 10-minute video hearing, denied her chosen counsel and sentenced to death for alleged cooperation with the MEK. Her crime included writing the slogan, "Women Resistance Freedom." Mohammad Javad Vafaye Sani, a boxing champion from Mashhad, detained, tortured, and given repeated death sentences for alleged MEK affiliation, ultimately upheld, a trained body that refuses to bow. Vahid Bani Amrian, a university assistant professor and sportsman, was sentenced to death with 4 friends, Sayed Mohammad Tagavi, Babak Alipur, Puya Gobadi, and Shahrokh Daneshvarkar for alleged cooperation with the MEK. And the list goes on, sentenced to death for alleged ties to the MEK. Akbar Daneshvar Kar, 59, Farshad Etemadi Far, 29, Ehsan Faridi, 22, Sayed Abdul Hassan Montazer, 66, Amin Farahavar, Gisa Vandani, 37, Alireza Merdasi, 52, Masood Jameh, 48, Hamed Validi, 45, Nima Shahi, 28, and Manusher Falah, 41. This is a story of presence, never named, yet everywhere felt, in each verdict for MEK support, in each cell, in every unbroken no. As long as one small light burns, the darkness is never complete.
And another powerful dimension of Iranian people's struggle for freedom is the resistance of political prisoners. From behind prison walls, a remarkable campaign has emerged. No to executions on Tuesdays. which has now spread to 54 prisons across Iran for past 94 weeks. These initiatives represent the enduring defiance of those who refuse to surrender their humanity or hope. At this point, we watch 3 messages from political prisoners.
و تماس گیرنده زندانی می باشد.
Dear friends, this is a voice calling for justice and freedom. They sentenced me to death penalty just by a single word called Mavi. This is just enough to sentence all those who are politically opposite or even with their own mental beliefs to this penalty. I applied for bail, but I don't rely for further process to reverse it. I rely on you as a jury member of my trial in worldwide court hall. To me, it's not a matter of saving life of an individual, but saving lives of many others. This reminded me once a man, I think it was Neil Armstrong, sent us a message far, far away from the earth. A small step for a man, a giant move for mankind, he said. Now, I could tell just a small step for saving a life carry us to a movement in order to condemn human rights violence in this world, in this corner of the world. So please raise your voice for justice and freedom on behalf of us. Thank you all.
Greetings and regards to the honorable participants of the Washington Convention. I am Vahid Bani Amrian, a 32-year-old political prisoner from Gezel Hesser prison. I am very happy that I have been able to let my voice, perhaps in the last weeks or months before my execution, pass through the walls of a prison that amid the deadly silence of the governments of the world holds the highest execution rate in the world and reach your convention. Our freedom, democracy, and equality not the rights of us and our people, who for 120 years have fought, suffered, and given their lives for them? So I had to choose either a personal life or stepping onto the path of struggle, a path that required me to sacrifice everything. It was a hard choice, but escaping responsibility was harder. Ultimately, I found my answer in joining the Mujahideen organization, MEK. After my latest arrest in December 2023, along with 5 of my friends, I was sentenced to death after months of solitary confinement and torture, in a trial that lasted only a few minutes. And that was solely because I refused to express remorse and declared loudly that our people deserve the best, and that I will stand to the end for their freedom and for the establishment of a democratic republic, bowing to no dictatorship whatsoever. Because we are the continuation of and faithful to the cause followed by our comrades from the 1980s and during the 1988 massacre, a path for which the last of them, Behrouz Ihsani and Mehdi Hassani, were executed. Our resistance and battle for Iran's freedom is, in fact, the struggle of all freedom lovers of the world against a global threat. Just as, in their time, General de Gaulle and the Italian partisans were not only liberators of their own nations, but saviors of the world from the evil of fascism. Therefore, what we and the people of Iran expect from you, the international community, is that you urge your governments to stand with us and with the just demands of our people, in line with your parliaments and the awakened consciences of your citizens. Support the alternative represented by the National Council of Resistance of Iran, its 10-point plan, and the resistance units, and respond in action to Maryam Rajabi's third option. With thanks to you all, Vahid Bani Amrian.
با سلام و درود به کنوانسیون ایرانیان در واشنگتن. این پیام از زندان قزل حصار است. زندانی که 10,000 نفر در آن اعدام شده‌اند و هر روز بر آنها اضافه می شود.
این تماس از زندان قزل حصار و تماس گیرنده زندانی می باشد.
کارزار سه‌شنبه‌های نعب اعدام از بند سیاسی همین زندان آغاز شد و 20 ماه است که ادامه دارد و ادامه خواهیم داد. این جانب خود چند بار در رابطه با هواداری از سازمان مجاهدین دستگیر شده و جمعاً بیش از 15 سال را در زندان‌های مختلف با شکنجه‌های روحی و جسمی و سلول‌های انفرادی روبرو بوده و در یک زندگی توأم با ناامنی شاهد روزهای اعدام بسیاری از مجاهدان و آزادیخواهان بودم. اما باز هم اگر در معرض انتخاب مجدد قرار گیرم، در انتخاب این راه هرگز تردیدی نخواهم کرد. زیرا مردم ایران شایسته برخورداری از آزادی و زندگی شرافتمندانه با معیارهای انسانی اند.
این تماس از زندان قزل حصار و تماس گیرنده زندانی می باشد.
و سازمان مجاهدین خلق تنها امید مردم ایران برای سرنگونی رژیم ضد انسانی و استقرار جمهوری دموکراتیک و آزاد است. تردیدی ندارم که آن روز دیر نیست و من بارقه پیروزی را در چهره همرزمان زندانیم و کانونهای شورشی می‌بینم که محکم و استوار و بیباک ایستاده‌اند و حتی احکام اعدام هم نتوانسته در روحیه مقاوم آنها کمترین تزلزلی ایجاد کند. همراه دیگر یاران زندانیم برای شما در این کنوانسیون آرزوی موفقیت می‌کنیم و خطاب به دولت‌های خارجی می‌گوییم که در کنار مردم ایران قرار بگیرید و از آلترناتیو معتبر و دموکراتیک شورای ملی مقاومت که ائتلافی از نیروهای مختلف است حمایت کنید. تغییر این رژیم ضرورت صلح و ثبات در منطقه خاورمیانه است. با تشکر و درود به همه شما. علی معزی، زندان قزل حصار، آبان 404.
Despite the regime's wave of oppression, the voices emerging from inside Iran tell a different story. The story of resistance. Across the country, young people are joining the resistance units, taking bold actions to break the wall of fear and ignite a nationwide uprising. Now, let us see a video clip of activities of resistance units in Iran.
In 2014, a spark was lit, and it has grown into a powerful movement. The resistance units, a nationwide network of courageous citizens organized by the MEK, active in all 31 provinces of Iran. These are not distant voices. They are Iran's enduring spirit, determined students, steadfast workers, committed teachers, creative artists, and resilient athletes. Born under the weight of repression, they began in quiet circles, united by a simple pledge. Freedom is worth every sacrifice. From small beginnings, they have expanded into thousands of organized groups, 20, 30, 50 strong, forming a web of defiance that the regime cannot silence. Even Tehran's rulers acknowledge the truth. This movement is growing and it cannot be stopped. Their mission? To break the wall of fear that sustains tyranny. They challenge symbols of oppression, remove propaganda, and project messages of freedom across Iran's cities. Through banners, leaflets, and flash demonstrations, they declare, "Down with the dictator," and "Victory to freedom." In October 2025, Tehran witnessed a wave of public support. Motorcycle and car caravans saluting Maryam Rajavi's election as president-elect of the National Council of Resistance. From Pasargadai's historic stones to Shiraz's vibrant streets, banners carried a message of hope, linking Iran's proud past to a future of liberty. Every act, quiet or bold, is part of a deliberate strategy. Embedded in society, these networks coordinate through secure channels, synchronizing efforts from Tehran to Tabriz. They weaken the regime's machinery of fear and inspire millions to move from silence to action. Even the regime admits its concern. Their own words confirm the resistance unit's impact.
یک مثلثی در این قضایا فعال بوده است. پادویش هم مربوط به سازمان منافقین بود. از ماه‌ها قبل اینا آماده بودن.
شما نمیتونید از یک جریان علیه انقلاب و عناد با نیروهای انقلاب یاد بکنید و جای پای جریان نفاق رو در اونجا نبینید.
در رأسش گروه‌هایی که منافقین که بیشترین نقش رو در سازماندهی این حوادث او کار انجام میداد.
The regime strikes back with brutality. Thousands arrested, hundreds disappeared, lives lost in silence. Yet from this suffering, the resistance units emerge stronger. Since the 2022 uprising under the banner Women, Resistance, Freedom, a new force has risen, proving that the end of tyranny is inevitable. To Iran's daughters and sons, they are a living promise. Freedom is not a dream, it is a destiny within reach. From Iran's streets to the global stage, their message is clear. Democracy is not a whisper, it is a call to action. Guided by Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan and the National Council of Resistance, they carry the vision of a free and democratic Iran. Out of decades of struggle emerges a united people, resilient, determined, victorious. The dawn of freedom is breaking.
At this time, we hear directly from some of the members of Resistance Unit.
من یک کانون شورشی هستم. اگر بخوام از وضع ایران بگم، فقر، گرونی، بیکاری و ظلم و ستم آخوندا بیداد میکنه. من این وضعیت رو دیدم و فهمیدم که نمیشه ساکت نشست و باید بلند شد کاری کرد. سیمای آزادی رو دیدم، کار کانونهای شورشی رو دیدم و با خواهران مجاهد آشنا شدم. با برنامه 10 ماده خواهر مریم آشنا شدم و فهمیدم که تنها جواب ظلم آخوندا پیوستن به کانونهای شورشیه. ما زنان آخرین ضربه را به رژیم آخوندی خواهیم زد. ما یگانهای رزمی خواهران را تشکیل میدیم و این رژیم را با حمایت شما و با تلاش‌های شما در خارج از ایران سرنگون میکنیم. پس همه با هم حاضر.
سلام و درود. من آیدا هستم از نوشهر. صدای من رو از قلب ایران در زنجیر میشنوید. من خانم شورشی هستم و بخش از فعالیتم رو برای اون بخشیدن به مردمی که دفاع در طوفان حوادث هستن قرار میدم. ما تو شرایط خفقان، ترس، و سرکوب در حال مبارزه هستیم و از مریم به عنوان یک حامی کسی که این مبارزه کردن می‌آموزه و اعتماد به نفس ما میده برای مقابله با دشمن در شرایطی که ما در حال مقابله هستیم که هم خطر داریم و در حال مقابله با دشمن هستیم. دوستان زیاده از من هستن که در زیر تیغ اعدام هستن. گویا بابک ما از شما خواهش میکنیم که صدای ما بشیم در دنیا و اینکه هوای ما رو داشته باشه و فعالیت ها ما رو به عنوان قانون شورشی رسید بشونیم و از همه شما ممنونم که صدای ما رو میشنوید به امید روزی که ایران آزاد بشه.
با سلام، من علی هستم، یک قانون شورشی از تهران. به کنوانسیون شما در واشنگتن سلام و درود عرض می‌کنم. جامعه ما در یک وضعیت انفجاری شدید قرار دارد. فساد همه جا را فرا گرفت. شکنجه، اعدام، بیداد می‌کند. ما با پذیرش خطرات مقاومت می‌کنیم، چرا که می‌دانیم آزادی را به کسی در سینه طلایی تبدیل نمی‌کنیم. ما باید خودمان آن را به دست بیاوریم. ما از خانم مریم رجوی یاد گرفتیم هیچ سدی نیست که نتوانیم از آن عبور کنیم. با شعار میتوان و باید که حاضریم بهای آن را بپردازیم و به یمن وجود سازمان مجاهدین خلق ایران یک مقاومت گسترده و سراسری علیه رژیم وجود دارد. این مسیر انسان‌های بسیاری شکنجه شدند و ده‌ها هزار نفر جان خود را فدا کردند. نسل ما ادامه دهندگان راه شهدای 30,000 سربدار قتل عام سال 1367 است. یک بار دیگر برای کنوانسیون شما آرزوی موفقیت می‌کنم و از شما خواهانم صدای ما را در صحنه بین‌المللی باشید و خواهر مریم عزیز را یاری کنید. با درود مجدد به شما، به همه شما حاضران در این کنوانسیون موفق باشید.
Now let us watch two messages from those who attended both 2019 and 2022 uprising.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to the Grand Convention of Iranians in Washington. My name is Elham Sajedian. I am from Shiraz, one of the major centers of the uprising in Awan 98, November 2019. Speaking about the youth of the uprising is for me deeply connected with those young people who under both dictatorships of the Shah and the Mullahs paid the price for their people's freedom. My father Muhammad Sajedian, during the Shah's dictatorship, tortured and imprisoned for years by Savak agents. At that time he was about 25 years old. Under the dictatorship of Mullahs, my father was arrested, tortured, and then only 15 days later executed publicly in the main square of Shiraz for supporting the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran when I was only 2 days old. He was 34 years old at the time of his execution. My uncle Jalal Sajedian was also executed by firing squad 2 years before my father at the age of 20. For supporting the same organization, they even forced his father to pay for the cost of the bullets, and they did not allow the names of these loved ones to be inscribed on their gravestones. Ladies and gentlemen, the silence of those years paved the way for the continuation of the clerical regime's murderous genocide to this very day. Today, we mark the anniversary of 2019 uprising. In that uprising, the main slogan was "Death to the principle of the supreme leader's rule." Many streets of Shiraz were liberated. In recent years, the youth and especially the women of Iran have been at forefront with remarkable courage and growing courage every day, uprooting these criminals from our homeland. We say no to the disgraceful policy of appeasement and dealing with the mullahs. We say no to war and destruction. We say yes to the freedom of Iran by its people and their organized resistance. Hazir, Hazir, Hazir.
با سلام و درود به کنوانسیون ایرانیان در واشنگتن. من حسن امانی هستم، معروف به فرزاد. از فعالان قیام 401 هستم. از سال 95 که از طریق سیمای آزادی با سازمان مجاهدین خلق ایران ارتباط برقرار کردم، مسیر زندگیم تغییر کرد. در قیام 401 هم دخترم هم پسرم هدف گلوله پلاستیکی قرار گرفتند. پسرم به من گفت از میان دستگیر شدگان اگر کسی در تلفنش عکس رضا پهلوی رو داشت با هیچ مشکلی برخورد نمی‌کرد و سریع آزاد می‌شد. اما هر کس که هوادار مجاهدین بود با زندان، شکنجه و اعدام روبرو می‌شد. اینجا بود که فهمیدم که کانون‌های شورشی چه نقش مهمی در قیام دارند و کابوس خامنه‌ای هستند. امروز درود می‌فرستم به کانون‌های شورشی قهرمان که علیرغم اختراق سنگین امید به قیام را در دل‌های مردم زنده نگاه می‌دارند. یاد بهروز احسانی، مهدی حسنی و زندانیان سیاسی مجاهد و مبارز زیر اعدامی که در زندان‌های ایران زیر حکم اعدام هستند را گرامی می‌دارم. آنانی که با ایمان و وجدان پاکشان ایستادند. در پایان به گفته خواهر مریم راه حل ایران راه حل سوم است، یعنی نه جنگ نه مماشات بلکه سرنگونی به دست مردم و مقاومت سازمان یافته آنان. مردم از این رژیم خستند اما هرگز نمیخواهند به دیکتاتوری سلطنتی که نسل قبل از من آن را به زباله‌دان تاریخ انداخت بازگردند و ما نیز اجازه به آنها نخواهیم داد. با درود به مقاومت سازمان یافته، با ایمان به آزادی و امید به پیروزی مردم ایران از شما سپاسگزارم.
We heard from political prisoners and resistance units. They represent the courage and determination of a nation that refuses to submit to tyranny. It is time for the international community to acknowledge and support the legitimate right of the Iranian people and the resistance units to combat regime's repressive forces, especially Revolutionary Guard. It is time for the world to recognize the undeniable will of the Iranian people for meaningful and lasting regime change in Iran. Thank you.
Now we turn to the next critical force in Iran's transformation, its youth. Panel 4, the power of the youth in driving change in Iran. Every revolution has its heartbeat, And today, that heartbeat is Iran's youth. We are joined by 5 inspiring young professionals whose work spans medicine, law, cybersecurity, and public policy. Mohammad Reza Hesami, a senior medical dosimetrist at the U.S. Oncology Network. Mehrana Mohammadi, a JD candidate at Penn State Dickinson Law, where she serves in multiple leadership roles. Ryan Nasir is a computer science student and R&D intern in San Diego. Sina Saidian, a JD candidate at the University of Virginia School of Law, a Karsh Dillard scholar, and editor of the Virginia Law Review. The moderator for this panel is Nicole Shariati, a cybersecurity consultant based in Denver, Colorado, with a degree from Georgia Tech. Please join me in welcoming our 4 speakers. And before that, I would like to invite all of us to view a video clip of the most recent gathering of the youth in Paris.
Thank you, everyone. Can we please take a moment to thank the people in Iran for sharing their messages earlier before this panel? Please, thank you. It is my honor to stand before you all today as we discuss Iran's youth under the regime rule. My name is Nicole Shariati, and I stand before you not only as a proud Iranian American, but as the daughter of a brave political prisoner. My father was imprisoned for daring to speak the truth, for demanding the very freedoms that this regime has stolen from generations of Iranians. I am honored to be able to stand here today because of my father's strength and bravery. And it is my duty as an Iranian American and as a supporter of MEK to continue sharing his story and many others and ensure that their sacrifice for a free Iran will never be forgotten. For over 4 decades, the regime has ruled through fear, humiliation, and bloodshed. It has tried to break Iran's youth, to strip them of hope, to silence their voices, and to convince them that change is impossible. But the regime has failed. It has failed because the youth of Iran, this brave, relentless generation, refuses to surrender their future. From shuttered universities and censored media to the brutality of the police, this government has done everything in its power to suffocate free thought. But every act of repression has only fueled defiance. Even when the internet is shut down, they find ways to connect. Even when their friends are arrested or killed, they continue to organize. They are fearless, and that is what terrifies the regime the most. Inside Iran, resistance units have become the beating heart of this movement, agile groups that defy tyranny with courage and creativity. And abroad, young Iranians amplify their voices, exposing the regime's crimes to the world and proving that this fight is both national and global. History tells us that Iran's youth has always been the force of change, from the constitutional revolution to the recent uprisings. They are the engine of progress and the nightmare of dictators. MEK has laid out a plan not just to resist, but to rebuild. A free economy, open universities, women's equality, and unrestricted access to information. These are not dreams, they are the blueprint of a democratic Iran where no young person will ever be silenced again for wanting to live free. So today, as we begin our discussion, let's remember, this is not just about the suffering of Iran's youth, it's about their strength. It's about a generation that has turned pain into power, oppression into organization, and fear into fire. With that, it's my honor to introduce our panelists to hear their insights and experiences and to honor the youth who continue to risk everything for a free Iran. I'm honored to invite Mohammad Reza to the floor. He stood at the forefront of the 2008-2009 uprisings in Iran, witnessing history in the making. Mohammad Reza, could you please share with us a brief glimpse of your experience and how it was like living in Iran for you?
Yes, thank you, Nicole. I would like to encourage the audience to think about what is that a young person would usually want as they grow up. When you are young and you have this all energy, you have this whole life in front of you. You want to be the best version of yourself. You want to grow up and you want to have your nation grow with you. You want to be someone. You want to do something. But as you start to engage in the society, as you start to engage with the system, you realize that the regime does not really care about any of your hopes and dreams. What they care about is how you dress, how you present yourself to the society, what ideology you follow. They are not really there to use the resources of the nation to provide for your well-being, but they are there to create these subordinates that follows their rule. If you don't follow their ideology, you're outcast. So then the question becomes, who grows up wanting to wage war? Who grows up wanting to eradicate nations? Who grows up wanting to export terrorism? Who sees all the corruption inside the system and wouldn't question it? Or who would, want to go after nukes and missiles? So to answer your question of how it felt living in Iran, it felt like we were in a prison. It felt like, we didn't care for the regime. The regime didn't care for us. And it was fun to be with friends and family and, of course, make friendships. But when the ground is not there for your growth, your options are really limited. We were trying to survive the system without letting our dreams die. So, your options become very, very limited. It's either you have to accept the humiliation, accept the poverty that is imposed on you by this regime, or you have to get out of the country and go after your dreams elsewhere. Or the third option would be to fight the regime back and try to gain control of your destiny.
So you mentioned the humiliation of the youth. Why do you think the regime keeps suppressing the youth when they know continuing this path will create a population that grows to feel alienated and deeply discontent with them?
Yeah, see, Nicole, the moment that this regime stops harassing the Iranian people, the moment that people don't feel afraid anymore, that's the moment that this regime has to answer some really serious questions as why the nation is on the trajectory that it is today, as why people are becoming poorer and poorer every day, and as why is that we kill people and we put people in prison for expressing themselves, for wanting something else, for having different ideas. We all know about Ali Younisi and Amir Hossein Mouradi, who have been in prison for years now because they had different ideas, because they supported different values. And Ehsan Faridi, he's 22 years old, he's on death row because of supporting MEK. Why is that? Why supporting another idea other than the idea the regime supports brings you death and imprisonment? So, see, back in 2008, 2009, when I was in Iran, I was very young. I was a teenager. I had not formed any political opinions, nor I was the age to vote. But protesting the election results, it somehow felt safe for a second. For a second, we thought that we have the chance to express ourselves. We thought that we can go out and show that we are not fine with everything that is going on. It was on that very moment that I was out, my neighbors joined, my friends were joining, and then the rest is history. You saw millions and millions of people on the streets protesting this regime. So the regime knows this. They are not going to allow for mass demonstrations. They have failed everything. They have failed the economy, they have failed politics, they have failed foreign policy, they have failed internal management. The only thing that they haven't just yet failed is suppressing the Iranian people. So, it's no coincidence that Iran ranks #1 among the nations who kills minors, executes minors. It's no coincidence that they have ramped up executions because they are afraid of the people. I mean, the Mashhad Friday prayer leader, he said it the other day. He said, "We are not afraid of a foreign army. We are afraid of a nation, of a generation that no longer believes in us." And that is exactly why the regime is not going to stop suppressing the Iranian people.
Thank you, Mohammad Reza, for sharing your personal experiences for fighting for freedom in Iran and exploring the topic of social and digital repression and how it is affecting the Iranian youth. I'd like now to introduce Mickey to the floor. Mickey had the opportunity to recently visit Paris to participate in a conference with Maryam Rajavi and hear more about the plan that she has for the future of Iran. Mickey, the MEK has outlined a comprehensive plan for Iran's youth, including economic freedom, support for universities, women's leadership, and internet access. How can this plan realistically empower young Iranians to lead change in their country?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for everyone being here and taking the time to listen to what we have to say. The event in Paris was amazing. It was a wonderful experience. The energy and the atmosphere among everyone, especially the youth and the Youth Congress, was incredibly motivating and refreshing. And Maryam Rajavi did an excellent job at explaining her plan for empowerment. She began by emphasizing the need to dismantle the many IRGC monopolies, the very monopolies that have strangled the economic potential for the youth. Their stolen assets must be reclaimed and turned into a youth entrepreneurship fund where empowering young Iranians to create, to build, and to think. The goal is to promote economic independence. She also discussed the importance of having free universities to restore campuses as centers of thought rather than tools of ideological control by the regime. And I think it's really important that students are the center of freedom and have these forums to associate in dialogue and create scientific hubs to, like I said, think, to question, and to create. And most importantly, she reiterated and highlighted that guaranteeing women's leadership is essential to carrying out her plan for equality and inclusivity. The compulsory hijab and all degrading laws against women will be repealed and replaced with laws that actually empower them.
Thank you, Mickey. And from your perspective, what is one of the most significant points in Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to preface by saying all of Maryam Rajavi's points in her plan are interconnected, meaning none can meaningfully exist without the other, and therefore we demand all of these rights together because they collectively define a genuine and free democracy that we truly seek. That being said, I believe her point about establishing a strong and independent judiciary is a good starting point. Having a robust judicial system that functions as a check and balance on the government's power is absolutely vital to protecting any democracy. The Iranian regime has gone unchecked for decades, as we've heard today, and in Iran we've seen how the government often suppresses dissenting voices under the common pretext of national security, even targeting those who simply write articles or publish them speaking out against the Iranian regime. And having a strong judiciary is vital to protecting this democracy. And as a student of law, I believe that the rule of law and this foundation of a just and free democracy is essential. And I have seen how it can either dismantle or uplift certain groups of people. And this goes hand in hand with the idea of the separation of church and state. And in this context is for why we advocate for a secular system of values, what can be referred to as secular religion, where freedom and principles of equality are based on human rights rather than one person's interpretation, we should say, of religion. And such systems ensure that justice and governance remain impartial, which is very important in allowing everyone to freely live under the law. And religious doctrine such as Sharia law that is very, very much prominent in the Iranian judicial system cannot coexist with any sort of impartial judicial process or democratic governance as a whole. So all of those things really hone in on the separation of church and state and the freedom of expression.
Thank you, Mickey. That was a great job at looking at how the plan gives Iran's youth not only hope, but a roadmap for freedom. But plans alone don't bring change. The people do. And it's the brave young Iranians risking their lives every day who are the turning point that bring that vision into action. And so, Ryan, this brings us to those heroes that are on the ground today, the resistance units. How have these groups reshaped youth activism and the broader fight for freedom in Iran?
Well, thank you for the question, Nicole. As you know, one of the main themes of this convention has been the resistance units inside Iran. And as Mohammad Reza mentioned, when a regime that executes is the highest per capita executioner of minors, the response of society has been to fight the regime with fire and join the resistance units, and it's ever so expanding and growing every day. So I would frame the resistance units as the tip of the spear of society inside Iran. They are deeply embedded within society. They are the nurses, the students, the doctors, the workers, and the youth of Iran. They operate across every single province of Iran, and especially within the few past years, they have especially expanded due to the 2022 uprising, which more than 3,600 of them were arrested. And despite these immense challenges, they have continued to grow and thrive within Iranian society. They are part and parcel of society itself. I would say that the resistance units are really the guiding beacon of hope and light for the Iranian people in a land full of darkness where the clerical regime rules. And every day, as Mohammad Reza mentioned, the regime doesn't allow freedom of expression. It doesn't allow your basic rights to be expressed. So these resistance units, they carry out daily acts of defiance. They target centers of repression. They write slogans on the wall. And while these acts, we may see the final result as just a slogan on the wall, it is not simply just an act of defiance. It's a statement that someone dared to do this, that it's more than just that slogan on the wall. It shows that someone is willing to stand up to the regime and show that the regime is not 10 feet tall. It is a dictatorship on its last legs. It's weak and afraid. As many others have mentioned, the regime leaders and officials often warn that the MEK resistance units inspire the youth of Iran, and that fear speaks volumes to how much they've grown and how powerful they are within society, to the point where today we see these resistance units on video publicly expressing their support for the MEK and NCRI. They are in Tehran in broad daylight with motorbikes, not afraid to express, and they're willing to sacrifice their lives, and they will achieve freedom for the people of Iran. And lastly, my last point would be that despite the censorship, the executions, the prison sentences, the regime has failed to break the people's will, and the spirit, and there's a new spirit in this new generation that is rising, the regime cannot crush, and this will lead to the regime's downfall.
Thank you, Ryan. I would like now to explore what role does the connection between the resistance units inside of Iran and the organized resistance abroad, like NCRI, play in sustaining the movement? And how does this amplify the impact of youth-led activism?
The resistance units keep the flame of resistance burning inside the country, and the NCRI ensures that the flame is protected and seen throughout the world. While this synergy did not emerge overnight, it was built over decades of sacrifice and struggle by the MEK and the NCRI, from the 1988 massacre of 30,000 political prisoners who said no to the Khomeini regime, to the brave men and women in Ashraf who have fought and sacrificed everything to achieve a free Iran. From the early days of confronting the regime, the MEK and the NCRI have created the political, social, and ideological groundwork for today's freedom movement. This connection is a culmination of this foundation, and their courage and the resistance and the refusal to betray their ideals is instilled in today's resistance units. And so we see that the foundation that was laid by the MEK and NCRI is now instilled in the resistance units, and this will ultimately lead to the path for victory and a free, democratic, secular Republic of Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, for giving your insight on how the resistance groups play a huge part in our movement. I would like now to move to Sina. Sina, you're pursuing your JD to become a lawyer here in America, dedicating yourself to justice and the rule of law. I'd love to turn to you to explore that vision for Iran's future. Why are young Iranians committed to regime change as opposed to incremental social and economic progress, and how can that change be accomplished?
Thanks, Nicole. I think that's a very important question, because when we talk about regime change, it's important to acknowledge that it is a serious inquiry. It's one that has significant costs, and that burden has to be carried by the current generation of Iranians. So I think, as Mohammad Reza was outlining earlier, the landscape right now that young Iranians see is very bleak. These are people who are incredibly bright, incredibly motivated, but have grown up knowing nothing other than repression and terrorism. And how has that manifested itself? It's manifested itself in things like off-the-rails inflation upward of 30 to 40% annually, unemployment levels skyrocketing, lack of educational opportunities, all of that coupled with significant thought policing by the MOIS that we see in things like people like Ali Younesi and Amir Hossein Moradi, who have been swept up out of their universities for nothing other than the thought crime of supporting the MEK and daring to think about the idea of freedom and the separation of church and state. And so against this landscape, I think Iran's youth see no hope for progress within this current regime. They've been fed lies over and over again from people like Rafsanjani to Khatami to Rouhani, now Pezeshkian, calling themselves reformists, promising one more election will moderate, one more nuclear deal we're going to moderate, we'll give back money to our people, but none of this ever happens. And yet, each election only results in more and more repression. And we saw the charts earlier this morning with, under Pezeshkian's rule, a so-called moderate, we've had over 1,500 executions, an increase of tenfold over what we were seeing earlier in the century. And so this reflects a regime that is afraid of its people, but also a landscape that cannot be moderated, cannot be improved. And so the individual cause of any given uprising might come from a variety of social ills. For example, in 2009, it may have been because of the election fraud. In 2017, it may have been because of oil price shocks. In 2022, we of course know is because of a reaction to the morality police's killing of Mahsa Amini. But very quickly, each of these uprisings radicalizes overnight into a cohesive nationwide call animated by chants like death to Khamenei, down with the dictator, down with the oppressor, be it the Shah, be it the mullahs. This reflects an understanding among Iran's youth that the individual cause of one grievance might be an economic problem, it might be a social policy, but the root cause of all of their grievances is a regime that is filled with corruption, terrorism, and oppression at every single level, and the only solution to that is to take it down and replace it with a truly pluralistic democracy. And I'd like to make one final point about that, building off of what Ryan was talking about earlier, is the confidence in the idea of an alternative. You know, regime change and going out in the streets, it takes a lot of sacrifice, and I think the reason that we see successive uprisings, even despite all the imprisonment, all the killings in the streets, all the executions, Iranians are still willing to come out in the streets 1 year later. Why is that? It's because they have faith in an existing alternative in the form of the NCRI and MEK. And the resistance units play a crucial role in both organizing and radicalizing these protests, but also giving hope that people, when they pour out in the streets, they're not fighting alone. They're part of a national movement that has decades of history behind it and a true platform.
Thank you, Stina. And why do you think that the MEK resonates with young Iranians and their priorities for the future?
I think the first part of that is to ask yourselves, what are the requirements of an alternative in order to have transition? You know, you have the downfall of the regime, but how do you actually facilitate a new government? And I think some of the elements of that are, one, you need a commitment to democracy. Second, you need an organizational capacity with international and domestic support. And third, you need the institutional guardrails to actually facilitate things like free and fair elections and the formation of a new government and new societal structures from the ground up. And when we look out in the landscape of so-called alternative movements, the only one that actually has a consistent platform to deliver on this has been the MEK. And a crucial part of this has been their steadfastness in their first principles and their commitments to democracy and freedom. Dating back all the way to 1979, when Khomeini first came to the scene, many folks were saying, let's give him a chance, let's negotiate, let's make some compromises. But the MEK was the only group who from day one recognized that the so-called Vilayat al-Faqih, the Islamic jurisprudence that Khomeini promised, was antithetical to any form of popular sovereignty, any form of democracy, any form of progress that the 1979 revolution was intended to achieve. And for this reason, the MEK has been under significant repression, significant targeting by the regime. And I think it's important to recognize that its advocacy has not been in the form of just rhetoric. It's not in the form of slogans that they tweet from 10,000 miles away and call it a day. This has been backed up by a fight on the ground for decades that has been relentless, and a significant price has been paid. For example, throughout the 1980s, there was a reign of terror that Khomeini unleashed on the MEK that culminated in the execution of 30,000 political prisoners in 1988 for the crime of supporting the MEK. Or throughout the 2000s, there were successive attacks launched by the Iraqi government at the behest of the Iranian regime on the the unarmed freedom fighters in Camp Ashraf in Iraq. And I think most of us in this room will remember in 2017 when the Iranian regime attempted to bomb one of the NCRI's annual rallies attended by tens of thousands of supporters from around the world and dignitaries in Paris. I think that final point is especially crucial because it reflects how afraid this regime is of the MEK. Why else would you risk the total international catastrophe that would come from bombing a national gathering inside of Europe attended by the highest level people of the intelligence agencies, government, etc., all around the world? The answer is because they're afraid of the MEK. Because the MEK... The MEK represents an unwavering commitment to popular sovereignty, to democracy that is at odds with everything the mullahs believe in. And that's why, just as they're willing to kill their own people to support proxies around the Middle East, they're willing to take the extra step of assassinating and targeting and intimidating peaceful organizers around the West because they want to try to intimidate and suppress the MEK, but they have failed. And at every step of the way, the MEK has grown in support, just as we see in the uprisings. Each wave gets more radical, gets more widespread, and I think it's the stark contrast to the fake opposition movements we see in things like social media, who have no principles and use these uprisings to promote themselves and try to take advantage of what's going on inside of Iran to anoint themselves the unelected leaders of the Iranian people. I think an example of that we're all familiar with is the son of the so-called Shah, who's been living in luxury for the past several years and now suddenly decides to surround himself with a cabal of ex-reformists, ex-regime insiders, ex-Savak agents, to what? Anoint himself whether it's one day the so-called monarch, the crown prince, etc., of the regime. But these are deeply unserious people who do not have a vision, and Iranians do not want to go back to the monarchy of the past. They are willing to go forward, and they want to make that change.
Thank you, Sina. Thank you. I'd like to now turn to something a little bit more personal. And maybe we can spend 1 minute each with the remaining time that we have. But for each of you, what was the defining moment that pushed you to join MEK? What experiences or these realizations brought you here today? And we can start with you, Mohammad Reza.
Sure. I think being a part of the movement is really about the values that you share, the vision that you have, and the things that you believe in. So I think, if you look at Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan, I've always been for freedom of expression. I've always been for separation of church and state, and I've always been against the death penalty and single-party rule. So in those terms, I think I've been a part of this movement long before I consciously make a decision to become a part of the movement. I think I share this with a lot of people inside Iran. But if the question is when I consciously made a decision to become a part of this movement, was not until after I left Iran when I realized that the second option that I was talking about earlier, to leave Iran and just live your life elsewhere, was not any less humiliating than living inside Iran and not saying anything. I think that was a turning point for me. I would wake up every single day to the news of family dispersed, someone experiencing undue hardship, and someone being beaten on the streets or executed, and I just couldn't. I couldn't create this bubble for myself outside Iran, thinking that if everything is fine in this bubble that I've created for myself, my people are fine. I couldn't do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammad Reza. Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Sina said is a big part of why I support the NCR and the MEK and their neighboring organizations, is because they have a legitimate framework that actually enables a democracy. Because when this regime falls, because it will fall, when it does, what's next? If we leave this space for another Khomeini, another mullah to enter in, we failed as a movement. And I don't believe that this movement has that in them. I think that a lot of Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plans are pillars of the United States Constitution. They are fundamental in carrying out basic freedoms of human right. And the main thing that I really like is, like I said, the legitimate framework they offer, but also we don't argue that, when the regime falls, Maryam Rajavi should go in and be president, that we should take in governance, but we rather advocate for a temporary form of governance to ensure and mobilize a legitimate, permanent government that will stay and will carry out a true democracy. And I believe the NCRI does that very well.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mickey. Ryan?
Well, my mother was a political prisoner in Iran, and she was arrested at just 17 years old, and her and thousands of other resistance supporters of the resistance endured these brutal tortures that shaped my understanding and gave me a first-hand perspective on what true resistance means to this regime. I couldn't just keep watching, and at some point you have to start moving forward, and the NCRI and the MEK was and is the only true path to move forward and reach a democratic and prosperous Iran.
Thank you, Ryan. Sina?
You know, I'd say I was born and raised here in the United States, but I've had the good fortune of having an incredible upbringing by my parents who've shared many of the stories that they've experienced in Iran. And hearing the stories of folks who have endured suffering in Iran gives me a sense of an obligation to use the privileges and opportunities that I have in the United States to be a voice for them. And one of the things that's been very impactful in my life is I've had the opportunity, really the privilege, to meet many of the young members of the NCRI and MEK in Paris. And when you meet these people, it is truly mind-blowing. These are individuals who are very smart, very well-educated, many of whom grew up in Iran, were able to get out, move to the West, and they could have done anything with their lives, but instead they decided to commit the rest of their lives to fighting for their homeland. I think that reflects a true sense of passion for freedom, a true sense of commitment and selflessness. And when I'm sitting here, I feel an obligation to continue their fight, do everything I can, and I feel honestly, I would say one of the biggest honors in my life is the fact that I've been able to grow up around these types of people and also play a small part in carrying on their voice. And I'd love to...
Thank you, Sina.
Nicole, I'd love to turn it to you. You mentioned at the beginning your own relationship with your father. I'd love to hear your introduction to the MEK.
Yes, thank you, Sina. I'm a first-generation Iranian-American and first-generation university student, and so that brought up a lot of questions growing up. It came from, where's your father from? Oh, why didn't he go to university? And every single time I responded, without hesitation, he was a political prisoner fighting for freedom in Iran. And I never felt ashamed to say this to anyone that I've met. I know, yep, thank you. The Iranian government loves to use humiliation and fear as a mechanism, but I don't feel that way at all when I describe my father. When I look at him, I see the memories of 120,000 lost souls in this brutal regime. And so lots of people, they idolize movie stars, athletes. I idolize my father from his bravery and his strength. And so I find myself here today. It's not just my right, but it is my duty as a daughter of my father to continue this fight for a free Iran. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to say a couple of words before our audience Q&A session. But today we've heard the truth. Iran's youth are not victims of oppression. They are the engines of freedom. The people, they hold on to something stronger than what the regime can ever comprehend, and it's the will to change. From the brave young men and women risking everything inside of Iran to the organized resistance abroad, a new Iran is already taking shape, one built on equality, democracy, and justice for all. And make no mistake, that future is not far away. It is being created right now by the courage of this generation. Thank you all. Okay, we would now like to switch over to a couple of questions that we have from the media. I would like to, Ryan, would you mind sharing me some of the questions? Okay. Well, looks like there's no media questions today. I think we answered it all. We did a good job. That's what I'm hearing. So, would like to thank you all again. Thank you. It is our honor to be here. I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their stories. I really appreciate it. This is a huge for the movement. So thank you again.
Dinner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to our panel 4 speakers for reminding us that Iran's future is already being shaped by its youth, its courage, and its global voice. And now we turn to the question that follows naturally. How does Iran move from a dictatorship to a democracy? That leads us to panel 5, Prospects for Change in Iran, the Plan for Transition. We're honored to welcome 5 distinguished voices with expertise in medicine, engineering, robotics, international relations, and software systems. We have Dr. Firuz Danishgari, Mr. Reza Nemovi, Dr. Behzad Raoufi, Ms. Farideh Siddiqui, and moderating this panel is Dr. Saeed Sajjadi.
Stand up and clap for the previous panels, please. Panel of women, panel of the scholars, Dr. Kazem, and the youth panel. They did a great job. And standing up will flow your blood through your body as well.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Are you?
And thank you for being here today. My name is Saeed Sajjadi. Today's panel, Prospects for Change in Iran, the Plan for Transition, will discuss the realistic pathway to democratic change in Iran, as well as the future outlook after the fall of the mullah's regime. We're joined here by 4 distinguished panelists who bring thoughtful and diverse perspectives onto this conversation. Our first panelist is Dr. Firuz Danishgari, a brilliant surgeon scientist. He's held professor and chairman positions at Upstate Medical University in Sunny and Case Western Reserve University, and he is the founding director of a fellowship program at Cleveland Clinic. And the next, Farideh Siddiqui, a software engineer. She earned her master's degree in computer science from California State University, specializing in software systems. At Cisco Systems, Farideh worked on performance and reliability testing for telephony and The next is Reza Nemovi, a design engineer. He's had foundational role in significant research projects at California Institute of Technology, Caltech Aerospace Division. He combines mechanical design, actuation, and control with a mission to push boundaries of robotics that can fly, drive, and morph. Dr. Behzad Raoufi, a NASA scientist. Since joining NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory 2 decades ago, Dr. Raoufi has worked on many deep space missions, including Mars exploration, rovers Spirit and Opportunity. He currently works on lunar human landing system in the NASA's Moon to Mars program at Marshall Space Flight Center. And a bit about myself. I majored in chemistry, biology, then attended medical school, did training in internal medicine residence programs for the past 2 decades. I have a private practice in aesthetics. Currently, I conduct a research at Harvard University in international field on the subject of secessionism and autonomy. Thank you. Now, please let me start our discussion with a brief opening remarks on the topic. On the June 20th, 1981, Khomeini ordered the IRGC to open fire on a peaceful rally of 500,000 supporters of the democratic opposition MEK in Tehran. That day, the Mullah's regime lost the very last vestiges of the political legitimacy it had. The next day, the struggle to overthrow the regime began. At the time, MEK and a month later, NCRI were alone in that fight. It took decades for many inside Iran and around the globe to realize that the only path forward to bring a free Iran, peace to the region, and a world devoid of terrorism fostered by Islamic fundamentalism is through a regime change in Iran. Years passed. The uprisings of 1997 put an end to the claim that a reform is possible from within the regime. After all the factions of the regime, the hardliners and the so-called reformists, all have pursued the same policies of repression at home and terrorism abroad. Reform is not possible under a regime that its constitution claims that the supreme religious leader, now being Khamenei, is the representative of God on earth. Today, the regime in Iran is engulfed in the terminal crises, and there is no solution in sight. The Mullah's regime is stuck in a dead end, unable to move forward, and too fragile to retreat. Now, everyone can see that the fall of this regime is inevitable. However, for some, the path forward is not clear. They wonder what strategy can strike the last lethal blow to this regime. And others are concerned about the future of Iran, the transition period. In this panel, first we'll discuss the strategy to topple this regime, and then we'll address the concerns about the transition period. Let's begin. My first question is for Farideh. Farideh, is the prospect of regime change real and within reach?
Thank you for that question. Do I have my voice?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. So, yes, I do think that the prospect of change is real and within reach in Iran. let's look at the situation of the regime, people confronting the regime, and what I think is the real solution to bring change to Iran. For more than 4 decades of repression, corruption, and a collapsing economy, inflation continues to rise. 80% of the Iranian people live below the poverty line. Families are struggling simply to live. The regime has no solution for its deepening economical and political crisis. Internally, Khamenei is losing his hegemony. The factions are growing inside the regime. In the region, the regime's proxies have been shattered, and the regime internationally is now isolated. On the other side, people are reaching a breaking point. Since 2017, we've had several major nationwide uprisings, each one stronger than the one before, especially in 2019 and 2022. Through their slogans, people have rejected all factions of the regime, including the so-called reformists. Today, women and youth are leading the movement for change. Just within the last year, there has been more than 3,000 protests by 16 sectors of the society, which means that the society as a whole is ready for real change. But of course, just social unrest and the uprising will not be able to bring the regime down. We need leadership and organization, but that leadership and organization exist. Mariam Rajavi, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, the NCRI, and the MEK organization. Since 2017, the MEK resistance units have expanded rapidly. Only within the last year, they performed 3,000 operations against the IRGC and the Basij, and more than 40,000 symbolic acts in 135 cities of Iran. So yes, the resistance units are spreading all over Iran. So as you can see, we have, a regime that has been extremely weakened. Iranian people are reaching a breaking point. And yes, the leadership and organization exist. That's why I think, yes, the regime change is real and within reach. And of course, by the sacrifice and courage of the Iranian people and their organized resistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Faride. And next question goes to Reza. In your view, what is the vision of generations that grew under this current regime? What do they want? What's their position toward any dictatorships today or tomorrow?
Well, when I think about Iran's youth and the challenges they're facing today, I can't help but reflect my own journey. Not because of the struggles are identical, but because the mindset needed to overcome is the same. My life was shaped by pushing through unimaginable odds. And the experience is exactly what I believe the youth of Iran, that they will succeed because of that. Let me tell you a story. Since childhood, I dreamed of flying and exploring space. I grew up taking anything apart, anything that was mechanical. In my 20s, I was building cars, boats, helicopters, motorcycles, and flying was an obsession for me. Flight training was very expensive at the time, so I turned to skydiving. And about 500 jumps in 1 year, I had a major skydiving accident. When I woke up from a coma, doctors told me that I would never walk again, and that the nursing home was the best place for me for the sake of my family. But my dear mother repeated a phrase I've heard from Mr. Rejavi, "Mi tavan va bayad." It translates to you can and you must. I refused to give up. And after a year of going in and out of hospitals and another 4 years in a wheelchair, I learned to walk. So I went back to school because I don't want to give the second chance I was given. Studying aerospace was very challenging, brutal. And the professors told me that I should lower my expectations. I didn't. So today, I'm one of the lead engineers at Caltech, designing AI. We're building AI-based robotics and drones. We tackle the hardest challenges, such as putting a man on the moon and putting pickup-sized trucks, rovers, and helicopters on the surface of Mars. I see the Iran's youth the same way I see my own struggle. This path is tough, very tough, but it's not impossible. They have endured unimaginable hardship, risking their lives just for the chance to fulfill their dreams. And yet, like me, they hold to that same belief. Mi tavan va bayad. You can and you must. Iran's youth does not seek luxury. They seek liberty. They want to live by merit, not dictatorship. They've seen hypocrisy their whole lives, and they have rejected it. They want a nation that rewards creativity, equality, and free thought. They will succeed because they have found the formula. Through their unity, they've broken barriers of ethnicity, gender, and class. Organized resistant networks have given them courage and strategy. And what can I say about their conviction? Except they know freedom has a high price and they're willing to pay for it. Like in science, when all the right conditions exist, the outcome is inevitable. Iran's youth already have those conditions: intelligence, perseverance, and purpose. I am certain of their success because I have lived that certainty. Just as I rebuilt my life through discipline and belief, Iran's youth will rebuild the country. They already carry the mindset of freedom. The regime is only a wall waiting to fall. Now it's about structuring the final step and ending the regime and opening the door to a free, creative, and forward-looking Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, Reza. And next question goes to Behzad. Behzad, in your view, what's the most realistic path to bring an end to this regime?
Thank you for that important question. I'm also looking at this clock and thinking, how much time do I have to answer that? As an engineer and as a scientist, whenever I look at a system, whether it's to build it or to evaluate it, you have to break it down into its pieces and then put it back together and think about what is the process? How am I going to get to where I want to go with this? So I think all the previous panels gave a lot of statistics and examples of what's been tried in Iran. For 47 years, from the very beginning when this regime came to power, from day one, they started oppressing anyone who thought differently from them. So I want to give the final answer first. We call it bluff, bottom line up front. The only way, the only realistic strategy to bring this regime down is by fighting it and overthrowing it. When you look at political systems in the world, for instance, a democracy, you don't like the current government, you vote them out peacefully. No one gets shot, no one gets killed. The regime started from day one with this paramilitary forces attacking people, attacking political activists, beating them up, stabbing them. I believe the statistic says up until June 20th of 1981, 2.5 years into the so-called revolution, already over 60 activists or members of MEK had been killed by the regime. This is before anybody tried to do anything other than holding peaceful demonstrations, educating the public about what their rights are. So finally, after 2.5 years of this brutal oppression, Mujahideen, the MEK or PMOI, called for a massive demonstration in Tehran. Within hours, it reached over 500,000 people. That freaked out Khomeini. Khomeini and the regime looked at this and thought, if this continues, we're going to be gone within, I don't know how long, very soon. So he ordered the IRGC to open fire on a peaceful demonstration. Hundreds were injured and killed on that day. Thousands were arrested, most of whom who decided not to bow to the regime were later tortured to death and executed. This was a turning point. The regime said, I'm not tolerating any dissidents, any other ideas besides you're going to follow me, you're going to do as I say. And of course, as we've all heard in the last 3 hours, the Iranian society said, no, we want freedom, we want democracy, and we're willing to pay the price for it. So, this, again, was the turning point where the MEK realized, and I want to say something else. The strategy to make or to bring about political change is never determined by those who want change. It is determined by the government in power. When the government in power allows you to go to the voting polls, that's how you change. When they don't, the only way possible is to fight. You have to be willing to fight the very forces, the IRGC, the Basij, and there's like 17, 18 different organizations, each controlling some aspect of life in Iran. You have to fight those, you have to defeat those. This is the only way you can bring about change. And that is, the Iranian people have shown in the last 47 years, they're willing to pay that price. They're willing to risk their lives. They're willing to be arrested, tortured, executed, their families tortured. 14-year-olds were arrested and executed for delivering pamphlets in the 1981 demonstrations. Fast forward, in 2017, 2019, 2022, the Iranian people rose over and over, this time much larger than before. It was nationwide, as the numbers were given, 131 cities in Iran, all the 31 provinces. Everywhere in Iran, people are fed up with the political system, with the educational system, with the economic system. So now I want to go back to the question again. How do you fight this regime? Massive nationwide uprisings by the people of Iran who are fed up with the current situation, but with the added ingredient now, as it was mentioned earlier, we have the resistance units. For over a decade now, these resistance units were created and trained by the MEK, the very force that the regime is so scared of. And over the past decade, they've grown in numbers, they've grown in sophistication of the activities that they do. It started by just perhaps writing a slogan on the wall. Now in broad daylight, they get on their motorcycles and their cars holding the leaders, pictures of the leaders, Masoud Rajavi and Maryam Rajavi, and driving in the streets of Iran. That is the confidence. You put these two together, this is how you bring this regime down. Willing to sacrifice willing to pay the ultimate price for freedom and democracy.
Thank you, Behzad. Thank you, Behzad. And the next question goes to Dr. Firuz. Dr. Firuz, Behzad talked about and analyzed the most realistic path to bring an end to this regime. Now, many may question the ability and capability of the Iranian resistance inside Iran to play an instrumental role in bringing an end to this regime. How would you respond to that doubt, those who question the ability of the Iranian resistance?
By evidence, frankly. It's a good question for a person who's obsessed with data and evidence. And many panel members, which I want to again congratulate the previous panels, they were doing outstanding job. The first panel, the scholars, the women panel, the youth panel, and so forth. So some of the facts have been repeated, but probably for the sake of the younger generations in the audience, I would like to kind of answer your question in summarizing the elements rather than repeating all the elements. So this is a resistance that in 1979, after its founders were executed by the previous regime, the Shah's regime, they came out of the jail. They were less than 200 people. Less than 2 years, this resistance leadership mobilized over 500,000 demonstrations across Iran. And some of us are witnessing that. I'm an eyewitness of that. The same resistance published the most widely published newspaper in Iran, Underground, over 500,000 daily subscribers or readers of the papers. Imagine that in a city as big as Washington, as big as New York, you can run an underground operation to publish 500,000 printed paper today and distribute that through the secret channels. So that to me is the power of the social mobilization. The next one, after they were forced into exile, and they formed the National Liberation Army. You guys have seen the movies and so forth. Again, less than 2 years. The National Liberation Army was announced in June of 1987. By August of 1988, they imposed to Khomeini to accept the ceasefire in Iran-Iraq war. And he declared it as drinking the poison. According to the regime's agents themselves, it was the force of the NLA and the fear of NLA coming inside Iran that imposed drinking the poison to Khomeini. Then, in 2002, some of the members are here, the resistance revealed the most secret part of regime's agenda, enrichment of the uranium. And since then, they have revealed over 130 secret projects of this regime, leading to the recent military action. The most famous one, a lot of youth now know it, the Natanz and Fordo. They were the very first time revealed by this resistance. So that element shows the deep penetration, intelligence penetration of the resistance inside Iran. And its popular support, as you know, you cannot have that intelligence without a popular support inside Iran. The next, after Iraq war, the resistance changed the strategy and adapted itself to formation of the resistance units in Iran. And plenty have been said about the power of the resistance units, the impact on the youth, impact inside Iran. But on one element, again, as a biologist, as a scientist, I'll tell you, the regenerative power of the resistance units is unbelievable. Despite all the arrests, killing, tortures, and the fears, the resistance units are expanding exponentially. They're expanding in terms of their operation ability and in terms of their quality. A round of applause for resistance units. So In a summary, I have highlighted the elements of the capabilities for social movement, for military action, for intelligence, power, and penetration, and now the boots on the ground to fire the firepower we need to bring this regime down. The evidence speaks for itself.
Thank you, Dr. Firuz. In the first round of questions, we focused on the issue related to regime change, including the actual task of toppling the regime. Now, in the next round of questions, we'll shift our attention to the transition period and the 6-month period after the fall of the regime. The first question goes to Farida. Farida, in your view, what evidence suggests that after the fall of the regime, Iran will not descend into a civil war or become a failed state?
Thank you for that question. I must start by saying that the regime itself is behind this claim that Iran will end up to a civil war if this regime falls. Also, the same exact claim was made by Shah during the previous regime, dictatorship regime, that if I go, Iran will fall apart. But this never happened, and it will never happen. Because Iran is a historic nation state with deep cultural and civilization identities. Iran has kept its identity for more than 4,000 years and has kept the sense of togetherness of the people during these 4,000 years. Different ethnics and religious groups have lived together peacefully for centuries. They have not only kept their identity, but they have considered themselves an integral part of the Iranian nation. The main source of instability is the regime itself. Since it came to power, it spread extremism, terrorism, sectarian conflicts, and it funded the proxy militias in the region. So, in fact, the most common factor today that unites the Iranian people together is the fall of this regime. And it's important to note that we have an organized resistance that has been there for more than 60 years, and it has roots throughout the whole Iran, and has a plan, has a vision, and has offered a platform that completely rejects this claim made by both dictatorships, the mullahs and the Shah. So at the end, I must say that the guarantors of a stable Iran after the fall of mullahs are the freedom-loving people of Iran and their NCRI as the organized and political alternative for the tomorrow of Iran.
Thank you, Farideh. And next question goes to Behzad. NCRI, according to its program, will form a transitional government for a period of 6 months after the fall of the regime. And then the power will be transferred to the elected representatives of the people. Now, the question is, what evidence suggests that NCRI is able to address, manage the complex issues of Iran after the fall of the mullahs, and what would be the features of this transitional period, which is governed by the government of NCRI?
I want to draw a parallel, a comparison with what I do in my profession. America is going back to the moon and ultimately to Mars in the next 10, 15 years. In order to achieve such a feat, you have to develop the most complex system of systems. And how do you prove that this system can do this? You do tests. We design and execute thousands of tests. My job, along with a number of other engineers and scientists, is to oversee these tests that are happening. And not only you do tests on pieces and components, but you also put the whole system together and then do, again, hundreds of rehearsals of operational processes that have to take place in order for us to be able to do this. Now let's look at what's been going on in Iran. We've had a dictatorship for 47 years. The desire in the 1957 uprising against the overthrow of the Shah was to bring about a democratic government. That desire hasn't gone away. After that 1981 summer when the regime said, no freedom allowed, Mr. Masoud Rajavi, the leader of MEK, formed the National Council of Resistance in Tehran in 1981. In its 44-year history, it has proven not only it has withstood all the attacks by the regime and its proxies and its helpers, but it has expanded and it has now become a world-recognized, internationally recognized democratic alternative to the regime. Now let's break this apart and see how is it going to do that. NCRI is supposed to govern for 6 months to bring a new government. So as far as parts, I shortly mentioned the history. You look at who is NCRI. What is its organizational structure? How has it functioned in these 44 years? And what's the outcome? What has it achieved? You look at who it is. NCRI has more than 450 members. Members include individuals and organizations from all walks of life and it has a diverse membership of ethnic minorities, religious minorities, different political views. So it very well represents the entire society of Iran. Organizationally, and one thing I'd like to add is that 52% of NCRI are women. That is a strong indicator of gender equality and social justice for a free future Iran. Now let's look at how it's structured. NCRI elected a president for the transitional period, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. NCRI has formed 25 different committees, each acting as a government ministry or a department in charge of some function. Examples of Ministry of Health, Ministry of the Environment, or the Economy. Running as a government, it's been doing that for 44 years.
Thank you, Behzad, for your response.
Thank you.
And Reza, very briefly, because we're short of time here, Reza, would you, I want to see what your thoughts on the great deal of excitement and hope which surrounds the 10-point plan of Maryam Rajavi. Could you tell us what you think about that?
Yes. Give me 1 second. Well, coming from an engineering background and a life that I had to rebuild piece by piece, I see every challenge as a system that can be redesigned logically and scientifically. Ms. Maryam's 10-point plan resonates with me because of my background. But there are 3 points that I really like to address, and I'll try to be as short as possible. Point number 4, religion, separation of religion and state. In engineering, when 2 systems overlap without clear boundaries, the results are instability and failure. That's exactly what's happened with the Iranian government. It is a corrupt mechanism. Point number 4, the separation of religion and states ensures stability and fairness. Faith is not personal, and governance is impartial. A secular republic ensures equal rights for every Iranian, whether Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and Baha'i. And point number 8, justice and equality. This point really reflects with me because at Caltech, whether you're a contributor as a student, mechanic, machinist, engineer, we all have the same opportunity and we get the same respect. Iran needs the same principle. For decades, the mullahs and the IRGC has suffocated opportunity. And point number 8, it envisions transparent merits based on economy and restores dignity for workers, whether they're farmers, nurses, teachers, engineers, and retirees. When fairness replaces favoritism, creativity explodes, and Iran shifts from a restricted-based economy to an innovation-driven economy. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And next question is for Dr. Firuz. Dr. Firuz, 1979 revolution in Iran was fought with a promise, or what people wanted was freedom. But we know what happened, and their trust was betrayed. What would you say to the question that why people should trust this time around with the revolution, that their trust is not going to be betrayed again?
The answer needs more than 30 seconds, but I'll try to summarize. Really, the foundation of trust goes back to credibility. In any industry, finance industry, in my profession as a surgeon, you know, when a patient comes to me and says, why should I trust you? Why should I leave my life to you? How I know that you're going to do what you told me to do? How do I know that the promises you're telling me you're going to keep them? Right? Goes back to my past performance, goes back to my previous behavior toward the patients I've had, the word of mouth, and so forth. And I would claim, not only I would claim, I would present the data that has been presented by many panels in the past, that over the past 40 years, the NCRI has declared its position unequivocally, transparently, and committed and kept its promises to basically those elements. And the elements have been published. I think the reflection of that on the Mrs. Rajavi's 10-point plans, the freedom, separation of the church and the government, equal rights for women and men, and the rest of them that were demonstrated before. But to me, again, the concept of the promises made, promises kept is in the behavior of the NCRI, that despite enormous pressure over the past 4 decades, it has not compromised from its position to stand with those principles, has paid the price dearly, politically and otherwise, to keep its promises. The only thing I can compare here is to, I have a privilege coming into Washington, to the city, to participate and sometimes chair study the scientific sections of the National Institute of Health. The topic in hand is who is credible and what evidence that person or that group presents. We dissect those out and everyone's voice is heard, and at the end, the jury votes. The same concept goes with the NCRI sessions. I've had the privilege of being an observer, and some of the distinguished members of the NCRI are here. Truly, they dissect out everything like a scientific challenge in hand. And if you don't believe me, I would encourage especially the youth in the audience to go and read the annual report of the NCRI over the past 40 years and compare those with the outcomes, with the results that they predicted. The most recent one, the October 7th events, and go back and read the NCRI reports on that. The day after October 7th, Mr. Rajavi came out and said, the head of the snake is in Tehran. And it took 2 years. It took more than 2 years for the international community, including all the intelligence services, to realize the same thing. So for policymakers, the track record is the buildup of the credibility. For scientists, is the outcome. And I would propose the NCRI has done both, has presented the credibility in terms of the evidence, and has really delivered the outcomes that it has declared in its position. So the evidence is, again, to speak for itself.
Thank you, Dr. Firuz. We're now at the conclusion of our discussion. Our panel laid out a clear picture. The regime change is no longer a distant dream. It's in our reach, and the future is bright. Thank you all for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for lunch. Please enjoy the multimedia showcase and music interlude as we prepare for our next session. Please, we will reconvene here 2:15. We will continue with our keynote speaker, special dignitaries. You won't want to miss it. Come back.